Okay, we're rolling.
Okay, you ready to call the meeting to order? Okay. Today is Thursday, April 18th. This is the meeting of the Unified Land Development Code Review Committee. We're ready to approve the agenda, make a motion to approve the agenda?
Well, you have,
My roll
you're going
call.
to need to do roll call.
Okay.
Chair Standish? Here. Vice Chair Davis? Here. Committee Member Heisler?
Here.
Committee Member Ryan?
Here.
And Committee Member Boren?
Here.
Okay. Let's have a motion to approve the agenda.
That should make it much better. Yeah.
Someone like to make
I put these in.
a second?
Second.
Okay.
You want to do a consensus vote, or do you want to do a roll?
What is, I realize with the town council, you're doing roll call, does that matter for us?
Well, I think we can, I think on something like the minutes, if that's perfunctory, you could do a consensus.
Is everyone okay with the consensus?
Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, the ayes have
Okay,
it.
0 to 5, 5 to 0
5 0,
on the
okay.
ayes. The ayes have it, I will do the count. Long day for me today. Okay, starting, and is there any, want to have any changes they want to make to the agenda? I guess we're past that, but we're fine, right?
I just have some opening comments, and I would indicate that, you know, the way we're doing our agenda, you may remember we indicated the process would be staff input followed by public input, overview of written public comment if there is any, and deliberation. I do know Mr. Alan Harris is here tonight from our Planning and Zoning Board. You may remember he sent everybody an email about an issue, so I don't know if you would want to take his comments, but since he's not really affecting as much deliberation of items, but it's a separate issue that he wants to bring to your attention, so you can do that whatever you want. I don't know how it's going to impact your agenda or not, how you want to deal with it.
John? Thank you. I was a little nervous there. Okay, Howard?
I thought Alan had some thoughtful comments in his email. I really don't agree with his proposal, but I thought they were thoughtful comments, and I did do a fair amount of background reading to discuss what I think answers some of the basic items that he was concerned about, and is a simplified process that would fit under the special exception part of our discussion today.
Okay.
So
I'd like to hold until that then.
yeah, I think if he, you know, participates in that, then the simplifications that I think would be appropriate and still protect the integrity of the code and the interests of the community and what he's proposing.
We'll all agree as long as we can get to the special exception, since we've been running on ice a little bit with that. So.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I might as well.
Yes.
I don't know that this is a discussion as to whether we should hear him now or as opposed to
My
later.
suggestion was only if you wanted to, in terms of your agenda, if you wanted to take that comment prior to starting any deliberation on anything.
We can take the comment and then we can discuss it more in the special exception.
Let me just tell you my rationale. In the background material that we've got, you had summarized Mark had summarized the recommendations that we had been discussing, including one that gave him discretion to modify or waive some of the requirements associated with the special exception process. And I think that the particular situation that Alan was bringing up fits within the comments that I would have that relate to those recommendations. And since all of that was part of the special exception, I mean, we could find,
Okay.
I think if everybody read those emails from Alan, they were very well presented. But you know, that's my only thought. I mean, that's where it fits in. If we want to have him make some comments now and participate in the discussions later, that's fine with me.
Okay, my stand on the whole thing is it doesn't belong in the special exception category, regardless of what any of us feel personally about it. It's something that has been mandated as bona fide ag. It's been looked at. Nobody wants to give away bona fide ag status, and if it's bona fide ag in Palm Beach County, as well as other places in the state, then we should not be placing it under special exception. Okay, I had a eureka moment concerning Beck's comment about 3 days after our meeting and what he was trying to say. Why are we defining it? We're defining it, which you explained, because there's something in there that requires it because it's a special exception. And if it's agriculture, and agriculture is commercial, then why is it even special exception? We're not supposed to be looking for ways to circumvent allowing bona fide ag to operate without declaring with special exception status. That no matter how easy we make it, we're still making it a special exception. Even if you have to sneeze to get the special exception, we're still classifying it as such. And I'm saying that that is inherently wrong. And so that's my point.
Well, Madam Chair, just for the members, we're starting to get into deliberation. I wasn't asking for that, I was just asking whether you wanted to hear him or hear him later.
Right. And John has suggested hearing him at special exception.
That's fine.
Howard, to summarize, Howard is saying it shouldn't even be discussion, it shouldn't even be in special exceptions, is what I'm understanding you saying.
Well,
Yeah, but that's a short circuit before we even get into
Right,
discussion, that's
okay.
what I'm saying, you know.
All right, I do want to comment on something. I heard John refer to several emails on this matter. I've only gotten one. Was there more than one?
Two.
I didn't get a second one. Okay, so I apologize to you, but I haven't seen it. I've only gotten one email, so I'll have to defer to them. All right, so.
I had a retort.
Pardon?
I had a rejoinder.
Well, let's do that on the special exception part, because let's just move into
Okay,
special
well, I didn't
exception.
know, we're still keeping Alan here.
Just wait,
Okay.
wait. Don't do your work. I'm here for the long haul.
Okay.
That answers that question.
Okay, so we, any other comments, Mark?
I'll wait till we get into the definitions. They're there.
Okay. All right, so we've done call to order, we've approved the agenda. Item 2, minutes. Someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes? Any corrections?
Madam Chair, you can either do them by each minute set, or you can do them collectively.
I was doing it in the entire, would you
Yeah.
suggest the entirety, or would you suggest this the sections?
I would suggest you do them separately only if somebody has comments. If everybody's in agreement that the minutes are fine, you can do them as one motion.
And I do see we have a great bit of a little bit more, detail. I know other committees have gone back and forth on this. I'm happy with these minutes. Other committees have made comments, so if anyone has comments to the style of the minutes or anything was omitted, please speak up.
All I would say is, we were gonna kind of finish going over the commercial equestrian operations. We were kind of left with homework to try to come up with a better definition.
We'll be discussing that in the definition.
Right, that's
Okay.
tonight. This is just
Well,
the,
it just looked on the minutes like it needs to be rewritten. I didn't know if that's where we kind of left off.
what page?
Which one, March 21st you're referring to?
That would be the minutes we're talking about, right?
That-
Well, we were looking at them in the entirety unless someone.
Oh, all the
had-
minutes? Okay. I figured we were past all those. Yes, March 31st.
What page?
Yeah, that's where we
21st,
stopped, that's where we stopped off.
Yes, okay.
We had a break, remember, and then we decided after the break that you wanted
Okay.
to.
Is there a motion set for minutes?
I motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, minutes are approved. Do I have to say for the minutes, anybody opposed?
Yep.
Anybody opposed?
And clarifications for all three sets, right?
All right, any clarifications for all three sets? No? Okay, 5-0, minutes are approved. All right. I promise you, Mark, by next meeting. Item 3, regular agenda, new business, A.
On the first new business item, Madam Chair, I'm going to actually request that we table this item. I'll give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm requesting the table. We have a code section that deals with noise and how noise violations will be treated. As you know, the staff in Royal Palm Beach received noise meter training roughly about a year ago. And the gentleman from Quest Technologies, who is an expert in noise measurement and as it relates to training he doesn't claim to be a lawyer, but he does have a lot of experience relative to noise measurement codes, and indicated that our ordinance was severely lacking, and if brought to a special magistrate, could have a problem. So we do have a couple other noise issue cases that we're currently working. And what we would like to do is we would like to go ahead and have this debate with you, and also look at possibly changing that section of the code to have a more defendable, more appropriate section. Having said that, our instructor graciously provided me with information. The only problem was I got the information at 3:45 and didn't get a chance to read it. It's about a 2-page memorandum that I would like to take and digest so I could come back and talk to you about it more intelligently than I can at this point in time. But he gives a number of reasons, and some of it is technical as it relates to how the gun works and everything. So, with that, it's something that I definitely would like to have addressed as far as your opinion by the next meeting, so that we can in turn take that to council. That one might be a quick amendment by itself because of the nature of it. So, being that I have that additional information, I think it's very relevant. I skimmed it real quickly. If we can, I'd like to hold it off for one more meeting and then get into a full-blown discussion now.
Okay, Howard?
Yeah, I would like at the same time, you look into the fact that I will introduce into that discussion, okay? And it's, 2 of these pages on the handout are relevant to that, in fact. I'm concerned about at what point in time are we, as a town, spending time and money on private nuisance complaints rather than public nuisances. And I would look into the fact of, in that noise ordinance, for example, you have the Palm Beach County Animal Control, okay, requires that a minimum of 2 separate unrelated households complain about barking dogs before they'll even go out there and spend the money to do the noise meters. The Florida Supreme Court basically said that in their ruling, talked about any annoyance, it has to be an annoyance to the community or harmful to public health. Now, one neighbor cannot be construed to be the community. And I think there needs to be some type of mention as to separate public nuisance from private nuisance, or else the town winds up spending a lot of money on neighbors, one neighbor that doesn't like the other.
Okay, well that's a valid point, but that's not necessarily a code provision, that's more policy. And I can tell you the policy right now is that if I get a written complaint, an affidavit of complaint from anybody about a neighbor, about another property, we investigate and we move forward with a code action. So if you're looking to change that to where you have to have X amount of complaints, or somehow it has to be deemed public, that's a whole different discussion from a policy standpoint that would have to be discussed.
Now, the only reason I brought it up is we're talking nuisance, whereas if somebody has something within the 50-foot setback or an unsafe structure, that is not a nuisance to the community. That certainly would be one person filing the complaint, the code enforcement officer would look into it. But when you're talking about things that are nuisance, like my neighbor's playing his stereo too much, or is too loud talking, or what have you, that is specifically always under nuisance. And I question as to when you have that threshold.
Okay. I think Sean, is it that? Or, no?
I didn't
Dang, I threw it out there.
I didn't really have it out there, but I think nuisance is, you know, an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think if the code has a standard, the standard needs to be addressed in relation to the nuisance complaint.
Jack, did you have?
No.
Okay. And my only comment is, I have no problem tabling this. I think that was his original question. How does everyone feel about that?
That's
Okay,
fine.
and it is confusing. I know I made some comments at the town council meeting, but it is basically when you go from committee to committee, there's some inconsistencies, and I think this would be a perfect example, and I would really appreciate you having more time to review that and explain things to us. Okay.
I appreciate that. We'll have it on. It'll actually resort to old business at our next meeting.
Okay, so we're moving this to the next meeting, tabling. Do you need a motion on that?
Yes, why not?
Okay.
That'd probably be good.
Okay.
I'll move that we table it for further consideration and staff input.
Everyone,
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay, can we move on to old business?
Business, definitions. These were my announcements. I just wanted to, number one, member Ryan provided us some information from a county in California, Placer County, which I believe is in Northern California. There's some information about the county, and there's a long, where they have about 43 pages of definitions in their code that he has indicated might be helpful to us. So we'll start to look at them. We got these yesterday. We just made some copies today. So what we'll do is staff will take it. We'll digest them, and then even if we finish definitions today, we'll bring them back the next meeting just to let you know. And obviously, if anybody would like a copy, we'll be happy to provide you with a copy. We have made copies from the committee.
The one question I have, and I ask this because I've always been told, when it comes to definitions, what little I know, they can vary from state to state. So this is a good example to have come forward. But what you need to explain to us and educate us is, are some of those definitions governed by the statute? So in other words, as an example, nurseries being agriculture, bona fide ag in the state of Florida is my understanding in some other states. So say, example, I don't know if nurseries are bona fide ag in California or not. That's just an example. So say if they have an example of a nursery, but it's not considered bona fide ag in that state, do we need,
Right. You have to look, again.
We have to look
Remember
beyond
at our
the
last
definition?
meeting, I talked about the fact that obviously you can't copy other people's definitions without doing
right, that's what I'm
research
calling.
behind it. You're absolutely correct on that. And from a planning and zoning standpoint, California and Florida are somewhat similar. California's been doing mandated comprehensive plans a lot longer than Florida has. Florida really started in 75, didn't really have any teeth, and then in 85 did the growth management act, which did give the comprehensive plan teeth, but I think California's been doing it since like maybe the 60s. We call our plans comprehensive plans, they call their plans general plans. There is a whole bunch of difference. So when you look at California, but I think, remember Ryan, the reason why he felt it was, and from what I skimmed the book, is that because it's a Placer County in Northern California does seem to have some similarities to maybe Palm Beach County.
Okay.
So it's worth looking at. Anyway.
Yeah, I just asked you to guide us if you feel there's something beyond it. John?
Just as a follow-up, I read the background on the cities or towns that comprise the county. And the county seat, for example, is 7.5 square miles with a population of 12,800. Equestrian activities are significant in this county. Loomis is another town. It was in danger of being annexed by its neighbor, and the residents voted to incorporate to preserve local control in their small town character. You go through the cities or the towns that are, comprising the incorporated area here, and one of them qualified for an all-American city. Like
Delray goes.
I'm not sure Delray. I'm thinking of one further south Florida, but.
So probably Plantation,
Plantation.
and most of them.
But anyway, they seem like they were
Similar.
communities that had the same kind of background interests that
So you're
we
more,
did.
yeah,
They
you're
had
more focused on the
agriculture.
comparison of community to community.
Yeah, and like Mark was saying, you know, I thought that it looked like these people spent more time and money to come up with what they came up with that might have some relevance in terms of suggestions.
You can usually tell when you look at a variety of codes how much effort and time was, and if they really did a good job of doing their definitions by, it's not just volume, but it's what they cover and how it's addressed and carries itself. I will say this, we didn't talk about this too much last time, but you know, the American Planning Association, APA, they have a planners advisory service in which they produce monthly reports that they've been doing since the 50s. And I think they're up to like 550 now or whatever. But out of that entire series, there are, throughout the years, there are probably about 5 reports that deal with zoning definitions, how you do them, or glossaries and things like that. And like one is a glossary they put out about, I guess, maybe 15 years ago. It's got to be like 500 pages. And what they do is, you know, they try to address most of the terms that you might find in the zoning ordinance. What they did is, for each term, they would take the definition from 1 or 2 cities, and they tell you right, and the city of Aberdeen, Maryland, may have a definition they think is good, and they put it in there, but it doesn't mean it's right for you, and you shouldn't use it. It's just more or less to look at it from the standpoint of comparison when you're doing a draft.
As you're refining your own.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of sources like that, but still, any planner or anybody who's a lawyer, anybody who's drafting a zoning definitions or land development definitions has to be careful in terms of what they're using, does it fit, and then, you know, sometimes you still have to do your own anyway. You might need to borrow a little bit here and there, but you know, you might need to
You borrow
draft from scratch.
from that comparison, you find something
Yeah.
useful and incorporate it, as John suggested.
And it's the same thing with codes all across the country, and looking at, you know, so I mean, yeah, we can look at it, and there may be some useful definitions that help, but by no means is it like, you know, you can take this and go, okay, lots of action words, you know,
Okay.
and, you know.
Howard?
Yeah, I'm understanding all the value of all the efforts and what everybody has said. However, I'm still mystified how we can even talk about proceeding on this until we have that book that you said the attorney was purchasing.
I'm getting that next, that's the next issue.
Okay, because why even consider definitions when we find out that the state of Florida already has a specific definition, and we have to see if it applies. And so it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse.
Well, and that's why I had a little discussion with John. John is providing, I understand what you're saying, Howard, and that was kind of my point of getting a little bit more from John. He's providing as additional information to us where Mark is supposed to bring that definition. So between the 2 sources, my understanding is we're to look at that and see if we can, between the Florida definitions and what John's providing, see if there's anything we want to add into our ULDCs or revise or recreate. That's my understanding of what I'm hearing.
Well, my understanding is we can't change Florida definitions that are in the Constitution, so why even consider that some place in California has a definition we like better if the state legislature has already defined it in a different way? That's where I'm coming from.
All right, shall I get to that?
Yes.
Okay. The book that Member Bourne is referring to is the one that Mike recommended to us. It's called Florida Statutes 2012 Definitions Index. We ran off a couple copies. You can actually download it if you want to. But I will tell you, it's not going to do exactly what I think you all are looking for it to do, because just to give you an idea, let me run through a couple of things. Active practice. Statute 409, 91, 31, 627, 736. Activity of daily living, 381, 745. All it does is it lists for a term how it's defined in that particular statute. So if you're looking for something more common like road or one of the ag definitions we're talking about, it might list 7 or 8 different statutes. So the one thing that I would tell you again, and just as a caveat, what you're saying is, yes, depending upon the definition, depending upon the term, you got to remember when a definition is in any Florida statute, there's also 1,000 Florida statutes, and that definition may be particular to that statute, what that statute is addressing. So you can't always say that one definition in a certain statute, therefore preempts us from, because our purpose is land development regulations.
And just for point of clarification, and Jim wants to comment on this, or for you, but between the two of you, again, it's my understanding, based, and it's part of what Howard is saying, it's my understanding, Florida statute rules. I just want to make sure I understand this. Florida statute supersedes local.
Absolutely.
Supersedes local, but you do have room to
Right.
legislate from the standpoint of the municipality. What you can't do is you can't take something and overturn it that the state has adopted and say, oh no, we're going to do it this way.
Which, and again,
That's where you have to be careful.
right, and that brings me to the biggest issue in this town, is the bona fide, and an easy example is the bona fide ag. What the Florida statutes refer to as bona fide ag, and then it seems we have issues with ag in the community, so that's why I think there's some confusion as to what's going on in the community as far as definitions and statutes, and why we want them changing things.
Well, I mean, we have definitions that were rewritten by the informal framers of the ULDC prior to this management and administration. And they all have to be gone through and weeded out. And
But I think that happens when any town, from what I understand, when any town incorporates, that is basically, I mean, you have the county you're coming away from, and you have the people who started the process, and it's a birthing. It seems every new municipality goes through this. Mr. Harris was explaining this to me a few months ago. But if you have something to say, Jim?
Yeah, the only thing I have to say is that we have numerous terms in our code that are not defined at the state level. I'm looking, I just pulled out a guest cottage. No definition for guest cottage by the state. And that's a very simple example of multiple terms that we have that there is no reference to state statutes. So, I mean, when we get finished, or at some point we can take this book, look through our definitions to see if the state has defined the same term and see if there are any conflicts. Now, I mean, I don't think it's a reason to stop and to not proceed until Mike gets done with his book or whatever he's going to do. Like I said, there's a lot of terms that we need to look at that are not defined by the state.
And let me just say one thing, Madam Chair, about your comments, because it's one of the reasons why we're talking about doing the white paper that we talked about at our last meeting, or maybe meeting before that, is that things like Right to Farm Act, bona fide ag, there is not one piece of legislation that gives you a blank check preemption on everything. And I think what I hear from a lot of people is there's not a good understanding of the Right to Farm Act. They think it gives everybody a blank check to do what they want. They hear the term bona fide ag, they think that gives them a blank check to do whatever they want. But I can tell you in the Right to Farm Act, bona fide ag is mentioned, and it's mentioned in conjunction with best management practices. So that's why I think we need to clarify and make sure that we have something in writing that kind of follows everything, because I think it's more or less the fact that some folks who don't really have the understanding of the statute or thinks they do, sometimes uses it inappropriately, and they think it's a question that the town, for example, is trying to give them a hard time with ag, when that's not the case at all.
So you mentioned several meetings back that white paper would be coming, I think, it would be coming from another committee?
No, what it would be is the staff will put it together.
Okay, staff's
We're
putting
going
it
to try to run it together through legal, and then
Right.
then we'll have council bless it as a, it's not, I don't want to call it a policy, but it's more or less like an approach to how we view.
And you'll dare to show it to all the ag people in town? God bless you.
It'll be available, then we can put it on the website.
There you go. Okay, John, did you have something?
Yeah.
And then Howard.
I think this goes back to the preamble to our definitions that I made a motion and we approved it, was that we recognize that we intend for our definitions to be subject to the state constitution and state statutes that relate to the code that's adopted by the town. I mean,
Right.
that's
That was
the
our
whole
first-
idea. That was just a general thing that says, look, we may make some mistakes, we may not do it exactly like, but we recognize that we're subject to whatever the state.
Yes,
So that's why we did that. And I think
and it's a good time to bring it up again. That this
that's
is,
the preamble, so to speak, to the definitions.
Jen, you have anything else to say? Oh, Howard, I'm sorry, I thought you were going to Howard.
I just wanted to make a comment in relation to what Mark just said. There are plenty of places where the Right to Farm Act is mentioned without mentioning bona fide best management practices. In fact, in one of the handouts I gave you, it specifically mentions with accepted commercial agricultural practices. Okay, so the Right to Farm Act was there prior to the Best Management Clause, and the Best Management Clause pertains to being sued for nuisance lawsuits. It doesn't pertain to other factors in relation to the right to farm.
Oh, it does. You're not aware it's in the Right to Farm Act?
I didn't say it was not in the Right to Farm Act. I'm
So then
saying
how would it not
You said
apply?
it referred to nuisance, I believe.
the best management practices are specifically there in relation to whether or not an agricultural practice is a nuisance.
Okay, but what did I say? You're reacting to what I said. What I said was, people take the Right to Farm Act and think it gives them a blank check to do whatever they want. That was my comment. Nothing else as far as, I certainly agree with what you're talking about as far as nuisance, absolutely.
Which, and it gets back to your comment that the staff is putting together a paper that we will bring up, John.
Yeah, and I think just to follow up, in our first meeting, when Mike Cirillo was here, he brought that out specifically. He said, look, the right to farm benefits depend on best management practices. And he just made that statement, and he said, you know, whatever you talk about, you got to think of it in those terms. So,
Excuse me, the right to farm, for example, the town cannot decide that if you want to plant corn, you got to get a permit from them. You have a right to farm. That has nothing to do with best management practices. You still have your right to farm and be a farmer under the Florida Constitution, whether you have best management practices or not.
No, I think he was saying the best management practices relate to the nuisance that you were talking about.
I understand that, but the point is, you got a loose gun here, all right? And if you allow people to start shooting in different directions and state things in ways that it sounds like something it isn't, then I have issue with that.
And you and I are in total agreement. I don't think I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so just to hear just to summarize what I've heard discussed, as an example, your corn example. Nobody's saying, I don't believe anyone's saying you can't plant corn. What I think the nuisance relates to is, say if they decide to bring in manure to fertilize the corn, they must follow best management practices. There's different levels, I think, of agriculture that has to be addressed. And again, that's where that white paper comes in. So you can plant your corn if you're ag, but if you choose, your best management practices would apply to how you use your chemicals, your fertilizers, your irrigation. So there's different levels that have to be.
However, you cannot allow people to start making the state without challenge. You cannot allow people to start making the unchallenged statement that the Right to Farm Act is only applicable when you are adhering to best management practices. Because the Right to Farm Act is also applicable to a person's right to farm without hindrance, meaning getting a permit, getting special permission, and things like that. Whether or not you can be sued out of business as a nuisance, that's where the BMPs come in. But as far as the right to farm, the basic right to farm, okay, that was there long before the BMP clause, and there's still much of your right to farm that's retained as far as being able to go and do it without the government saying you can't.
yeah, what we're talking about here, and I don't think Harv and I need to argue before the Supreme Court on this, because I think other people should do that. But I think the fact remains that the redundant regulation, and that's being addressed in clarifying statutes that are being proposed in this session. And they're doing this to reiterate what is already in the statutes with regard to local communities or counties regulating farming activities. They're saying there can't be duplicate regulation, but the fact that there can't be duplicate regulation depends on whether they're implementing, if such activity is regulated through implemented best management practices. They're saying that if you've got an operation and for some reason the town code says that you're in violation of whatever the code requirement is, and you can be bona fide ag, but that's not the defense. The defense is if your activity is regulated through implemented best management practices or other regulations adopted as rules under Chapter 120 by the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Agriculture, or a water management district. So, I mean, the point is that many of the issues are addressing the fact that right to farm is not a get-out-of-jail-free card if you're not doing responsible practices. And I think the statutes have always said generally accepted agriculture management practices, etc. Now it's getting more defined as the various departments that regulate activities in the state are recognizing best management practices. And the one that goes back to Alan Harris's comments is the fact that in 2011, the Department of Agriculture recognized best management practices for equestrian operations. And, you know, my point is that when we're considering activities in our community, something that makes them entirely consistent with the state statutes and regulations is, have you adopted and implemented best management practices? Over and above that, have you got the property appraiser's classification? Are you complying with animal care and control? Have you got a town business tax receipt? And basically, if you've got those things, you know, that's all the staff needs to review in recommending approval of a special exception to the town council. It doesn't have to be many hours of detailed examinations, as long as, and I think this is what Alan was correctly pointing out, that there are other, I guess you could call them regulatory bodies or regulatory principles that can be made part of the way the town operates approval of special exceptions for these activities. And that, I think, satisfies the concern that Howard has over right to farm and over the various rights associated with that. And that goes back to the fact that increasingly, almost all agriculture activities are being, I won't say subject to, but they're being recognized that they need general accepted management practices that are being adopted by, whether it's the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Environmental Protection or whatever. And as long as people are applying for recognition or adopting the best management practices and implementing them, and there's time limits and records and processes, that we don't need to duplicate that kind of regulation and that kind of implementation. And that's what I think would very much simplify the process that Alan was concerned about. And I think it simplifies the amount of work and the cost of the town staff to come up with an approval recommendation to the town council.
I disagree with most of what John just said, and I think it's faulty at its core, okay? Just right out of the gate, you don't need a business tax receipt to have an agricultural, bona fide agricultural enterprise. That's right off the bat, okay? And again, this continual tying of bona fide ag to special exception and business tax receipt flies right in the face of the Right to Farm Act, whether or not you have best management practices. Best management practices, as I'm sure Mark knows, has basic toward duplication of regulation. How much you can have, how close you can have it, what you can do with it, how far you can go with it, that's municipal regulation. However, even with no best management practices, and even with the municipality's power to regulate a farming activity where there is no best management practices, you cannot regulate it to the point where it becomes prohibitive to proceed with that activity. Now, of course, what recourse does a farmer have if the town of Waxahachie Groves chooses to do that? The only recourse is to bring them to court, and most people don't have the money to do that anyway. But the point is that we're not a body that's going to say, let's do this, and if they don't like it, they can bring us to court even though it's illegal. All right? You don't need a business tax receipt, and this is what exactly I find a problem with this rhetoric constantly being thrown in there that should not apply, okay, as far as my belief is concerned, and whatever I've been told all these years is concerned, to allow this rhetoric to get in there and be accepted.
You do know he was quoting what is a county code, not the town code.
I understand that, but again, it's
Just wanted to make you
being
aware.
quoted as if it's the way things are, and it's
Well,
not
it is
necessarily
the
the
way,
way
but
things
Howard,
are.
it is the way things are in Palm Beach County. That's a requirement for that ordinance which was adopted in '98. Now, whether they need to amend that, okay,
Well,
we're
that
letting
was-
everybody go and see it.
That was a standard joke that Alan Zeck used to have continually when you talked to him. Yeah, I bet you went down and got an occupational license and a business tax receipt, huh? Yeah, well, you didn't have to. Okay,
Well,
you
Alan
don't
needs
need
to talk
to
to
do
the county.
You don't need to do that.
County then.
Okay? The county's not going to bring you to court. The county's not going to file anything against you because the county knows that they really can't enforce that. It's just a cash cow. It's money for free.
Okay, let
All right.
John, yeah, no, that's what I say, John. And then we're, now, let me ask, have John speak, and then can we take public comments on this topic? We have two that just.
Well, again, the process was staff report
Okay.
and public input, but we didn't even get into the definitions. We kind of got
Right,
sidetracked.
right, so-
You know, if you want to, because of what we discussed, if you
Are
want to
these
let the
going to be
public,
brief?
you want the public come up after we finish the
Yes,
discussion
let's
on
just
this,
get it,
and then
and-
let's get back to the
Yes,
definition.
please. Oh, John.
I think the flaw in what Howard was just saying, since we're trading flaws here, is that to get a bona fide ag classification, you've got to have the property appraiser come out, look at the use of the property, and they require either a Schedule C or some other tax document each year to confirm that you're a commercial activity. And just a byproduct of that, you know, is a license and a business tax receipt. Now, if you don't want the license and the business tax receipt, you've still got what the county appraiser requires annually and requires as a basic granting of the bona fide ag.
Going,
Okay, Beck, and then Jim.
what you just said, and this is what I brought up last time, and I'm glad you said it. Agriculture is commercial, period. And we're gonna go back to this definition, and I'm just gonna bring it up, but we won't go there until you're telling us we're ready to go. Why is the only agricultural operation in these definitions that's called commercial only one? Why not all?
Okay, so when we get to definitions,
That,
we
and,
will be
and,
discussing
and that's
that
what
in
we're talking about,
detail.
so I
we're
think,
gonna
and
start
I
on
think
the
you and I
definitions.
agree on that agriculture is commercial.
Okay, so when we
Period.
get to definitions, we will focus on that, and then Jim?
Well, that, yeah,
You don't do
yeah, that's what my question was. I thought we were on the definitions. What I'd like to suggest is, can we start making some progress on the review of the code? And if we come to an agricultural issue, can we just put it aside until we get this opinion from Mike? So
Let's
skip
keep
over
a list of
all
our
of the
questions.
I thought we did that already, though.
issues.
I thought we already did that. If it's agriculture, it follows the agricultural statutes. Now we're coming up with definitions that, forget the agricultural
Okay,
statute,
well,
now it's all of a sudden.
well,
Wait a minute, all we're doing is identifying problems
I-
in the
I
definitions. We're
understand.
not suggesting
That's where
anything.
we're going with this.
Okay.
We don't even talk about it. If there's a definition on page 10 that's related to ag, we just put an X by it, and then we'll talk about it later.
Continue
when
on.
we get to, yeah.
Okay.
So we can get something.
Exactly, and please, as we're doing this, feel free, Jim, to raise your hand and say, you've gone past what we're talking, please, feel free, both of you, okay? Let's just keep this in check and let's get this done tonight. Let's take the public comments then.
Sure.
These are, now I do need to ask though, these are both for item 2,
Well, for what we're discussing right
Okay,
now, I
good,
don't know if this is two or not.
Todd and then Keith.
correct me if I'm wrong, the special exception is for something that may or may not fit in a particular area in the town, and it needs to be looked at because it may not fit in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true, and there's specific uses that have been identified that requires special exception review.
Just to be a little more precise, though, a special exception is a form of permitted use and generally follows all the quasi-judicial guidelines, which generally means it's evidentiary. If the town is going to deny a special exception, it has to deny it due to an abundance of reasoning that there is a problem with it, why it shouldn't be permitted.
My point is, it's something that's a special use, and it's not something that's normal and customary for the town. It's basically what it says. It may not fit in everywhere in the town, so we need to look at it on an individual basis and see if it'll fit in that particular area.
Due to its nature, it has
Exactly.
to be looked at.
Commercial equestrian is exactly what this town is. There's nothing special about it. It should not be a special exception. Forget about the right to farm or anything else. There's nothing special about having a commercial equestrian facility. It shouldn't be a special exception because it should be allowed from here all the way to the other end of Loxahatchee Groves, from there to there. Forget right to farm, forget state and everything else. It shouldn't be a special exception because it fits in every single square inch of this town. And it shouldn't be a special exception. There can be there can be rules for it or whatever. We can discuss rules for it because it doesn't have to have a special exception to have rules. It can be a use that you can do and it still has rules. You can discuss whatever rules you want later, but for a special exception, it should not be, period, end of story.
So a way of saying that, based on how I've heard Jim speak of the P and Z and other ways, is that, you know, you have different areas where different activities are permitted, so what you're saying is, within this area of Loxahatchee Groves, commercial equestrian is permitted, no special exception. It doesn't, because it's a point I brought up before too. I find some things that are in special exception should not be there. It's part of this town, and that's further discussion for later. Okay, but your point has been made. Mr. Harris?
I just wanted to address the point of the business tax receipt. Palm Beach County at one time was requiring a business tax receipt for a commercial stables permit. You must receive it before they give you the permit. Palm Beach County will not give you a business tax receipt until you have the commercial stables permit. So we recognize a conflict already. I think you folks, y'all have already been on this subject long before I brought it up. It's just, it was something to me that was involved. And that's why I wrote my emails. Lieutenant Fox of Animal Control told me 3 days ago that they are dropping the business tax receipt requirement for their commercial stables permit. But I'd also like to share with you that in as far as state statute 205.064, a local business tax receipt is not required for any person for the privilege of engaging in the selling of farm, agricultural, grow, horticultural, floricultural, tropical, la 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 la. So that's my point. Business tax receipt is no longer required.
Did you email a copy of
I
that?
mailed that. That was the second email.
Okay, I'd like to, I'll get a copy of that email because that's what I didn't get.
And on that point, though, let me just say that this is, I think we covered this at the last meeting, but let me just state it for the record. The definition is bad. Commercial, it's not, but it's not commercial agricultural operations. Remember, it's commercial equestrian operations. The equestrian component came to the table later when the equestrian groups wanted equestrian activities delineated to be under the Ag Act, just like any other specialty area. You know, whether you're talking aviaries or anything else you wanted to talk about, any other issue. There are a number of equestrian-related uses that originally didn't fit the Right to Farm Act unless you were breeding and doing things they had all that language about useful to humans and you got to get a product and all this stuff. And I think these guys, they were trying, and unfortunately they didn't do a good job of it, I think they were trying to separate the uses that you would consider from an equestrian standpoint to be more purely commercial. If you were getting riding lessons, for example. So you're not growing anything, you're not breeding, you maybe do something useful to humans and meet that part of the, but I think, and that's why they were trying to say, well, that's more, yes, I recognize all ag is commercial,
Right.
but that was more of a commercial aspect related to equestrian than to having a farm that's breeding horses and being a more pure ag type use. And that, you know, we'll have to look at that.
Right.
We've agreed, because
Right,
it's,
so that's a whole
that
big
definition's not
discussion
good
in
right
itself.
now. It's, you know, it's bad, so.
Okay, so if we can continue on to definitions then?
Okay, well done.
Well, that's a first one.
I think we stopped there, we agreed that, I have a note here, we said rework. Yep.
Is that one with the next, and we go to the next one?
Okay, so we are going on to, we're agreed that we're
So I
going
think
on.
we actually finished 10-7 was the last page we finished.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
And again, Jim, feel free to keep us on track,
I'll read
please.
the traffic.
And, yeah, feel free. Traffic stoplight.
Wait, honey,
Yeah.
you said you've identified ones that were major problems,
Yes,
So
I
we
still
were
have
minus
more to
getting those
identify
first?
that, yeah.
so do we want to jump around and do what Mark identified as major problems?
Well, I thought
first?
we'd go page by page, because
Okay.
like if we go on a page, I may have one, or I may have none, but you may have some.
Okay,
And my understanding is you're keeping a list that we will later go back and review and discuss, correct? This isn't the only time we're having these discussions.
Well,
And
I
that's why we're continuing to get this knocked out here.
I was looking for a list. I made a list of a whole bunch of definitions, and I can't find it, but we'll get to it when we talk a little more. On page 10A, the only problem definition that I had was, and Jim and I talked about this, as it relates to development. I'm not sure the last sentence, which says, the lot statute grows comprehensive plan specifically recognizes the right of the property owner to subdivide their property into 5-acre single-family residential parcels without such land division being deemed development under FS 3804. And look at 3804, it's got a lot of definitions of what is development. It doesn't really cover that. That almost seems like language that's more appropriate to be in a definition of subdivision or something else, but not
we
development.
can't find what you're
Wait,
reading.
you said 10-8?
10.8. 10.8 of definition.
It's
Page
page
25.
30 to 71.
Second from the
Right.
bottom of the paragraph under definitions.
What's the heading?
Development. It's the last sentence in there.
Yeah, under the term development.
The sentence actually starts in the middle of that paragraph.
You said, I'm just finding the part about 5-8, you said something,
Yeah, well, I think that should come out because I scoured the comprehensive plan.
I'm still trying to find it, I apologize, but I'm trying to find it on the page.
It's the
It's the
third
last
definition
part
at
of
the bottom.
Definition of
Right there.
development.
Okay,
It's not referenced in the comp plan anyway, so for that reason alone, we should probably take it out.
Well, wait a minute, I'm not sure it's not referenced in the comp plan. The whole discussions of the comp plan was recognizing that the town wanted to go back from the county-imposed 10-acre minimum to the 5-acre.
they're
Which-
reverting.
Which was previously existing. And that's why they adopted the RR5. Now, I think that the wording here, this may not be the right place for it, but I think that that was, you know, a major part of the development of the comp plan. The background of it was that 10-acre, or going larger than 5 acres, was creating a money barrier to operations that would logically be consistent with the progress of the town. And because it used to be 5 acres, and there were a lot of 5-acre parcels, they felt that it was right to recognize that it was the objective of the town to freely allow people with larger property areas to divide it into 5-acre parcels if they want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes without saying, I think, because the RR5 land use category is 1 unit per 5 acres.
Right.
But there's no policy in the plan that states what this says it states.
Also, Mike, I think you're referring to the fact that this is a definition for development, and when if you place something under development, define it as development, it brings a whole slew of additional requirements on the property, does it not?
Well,
Build it,
yeah,
so
it does, but, I mean, I just think that this language is not necessary.
it does, this could be somewhere
And
else
if we're
under
trying to make the
another.
code smaller and more resident friendly,
Well, the problem with the definition is this, half the definition is telling you what development isn't, you need to say what development is. And if you go and look at 380.4, there's a whole slew of terms as to what is development that are not even covered in this definition.
The whole
What I'm
goes
saying
from
is, there's nothing wrong with that sentence, that could go
It
somewhere else.
doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
Right, that's the
exactly.
point, because development in itself isn't a whole bag. And now, you also referred to the fact that if the statute was cited, because as an example, we took all those words out for what was it, agriculture, we took all that out and just referred to the statute and left it in place. So
Yeah, the
what,
problem you have with that is if they ever change 380.4, and you're quoting something in there, and now that's gone, it renders your definition either obsolete or inappropriate, potentially.
so your suggestion is to move,
Yeah,
The last sentence.
move and rework the definition.
okay, but again, the blocks, this sentence that you're suggesting to move, where would you suggest to move it?
No, I'm saying let's just delete it. I mean,
It shouldn't be in the definition of development.
I think
It doesn't define
That would,
development.
yeah, that would come under subdivision, right?
To me, it's subdividing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea was that they didn't want development to create a bunch of restrictions on the right of property owners to subdividing 5 acres.
And I can understand removing it because by putting it in under development, it seems to create a whole big actual burden on the property owner by labeling it development.
Can I speak at some
Oh,
point in
sorry,
time?
yes, I was speaking, I'm sorry.
I think removing it is the biggest mistake in the world. I think it should sit there like a sore thumb, standing out by itself, so we make sure it goes somewhere worthwhile. Because here's exactly what happens. When you remove it, it might not appear anywhere in any official document, anywhere on the town. And then X number of years down the line, somebody's going to say, pop out of the woodwork and say, oh, well, you're subdividing, that's development. Well, no, it wasn't intended to be. Well, there's nothing official in the town that says it isn't. And so until we find another place where it is, or until we find where it should go, I strongly disagree with it being moved, because when things get deleted and aren't already elsewhere, they tend to vaporize and people forget about them. And that's why somebody shoved that in there, because it was, ooh, wow, we need to say that. And they put it in the wrong
Still a
place.
bad reason for.
But my question is, I thought we just brought up a possible definition of subdivision, and you said delete it from here, and I asked if there was a place where we could move it to another definition.
Well, I mean, the future land use designation for almost the entire town is R5, which is 1 unit per 5 acres. Okay? The agricultural residential zoning district, the minimum lot size is 5 acres. Under the subdivision regulations, it says that a property owner can divide his parcel into 3 or less properties without going through the subdivision process. I don't know what else you need.
So now you've addressed
Yeah.
where it says that, and that's what I was looking
So
for.
that's why,
Okay.
okay, so we're acknowledging that, download the video when it comes out, we're acknowledging the removal of this sentence, we're acknowledging that it's addressed under the ULDC's, or
Well, it's
at
in
not
the
P and
comprehensive
Z, yeah, comprehensive plan, P and Z, on the terms of subdivision.
Yeah.
So once somebody, so if somebody had 20 acres and they wanted to divide it into 4 parcels, they get,
Sure, I can do that.
but you're saying that you said 3,
Well, once you get to a certain number of parcels, you have to do a formal subdivision
Okay.
process. If it's 3 or less.
And then they're a developer.
You can just divide it and go to the property appraisal with legal descriptions and you're fine.
Okay,
So if somebody had 20 acres and they wanted to divide it into 5-acre parcels, they could not do that.
they could do 10
Yes,
and 2
yes,
fives.
Yes, they can do it, but they have to do subdivision.
Okay?
So you could do 10 and 5 and 5 and just go down to the property
Yeah,
tax
and
appraiser.
that's pretty much consistent with state law.
You can also have 3 separate properties and join them as one. You can go back.
What you don't want is somebody that has a 20-acre parcel to come in and chop off 2 acres in 2010, and 2015, come by and sneak in and do another 2 acres and create a whole bunch of non-conforming lots pursuant to.
Well, no, it's 5 acres.
It has to be minimum 5.
If they do a lot split with the county though, and there's lack of coordination, it can happen.
Right, all I'm saying is what Jim just said is not necessarily a replacement of this for somebody that has 20 acres. Okay, I mean, I happen to keep my 2 adjoining 10-acre parcels deeded separately, so it wouldn't apply to me.
Yeah,
But if I went ahead and took some recommendations in the past and put them all under one deed, then I would be in jeopardy because of the removal of this.
Okay, I see his point then. He's saying, you're saying you want it in because it specifically cites it as not being deemed development, is those
To
3,
break it to 5 acres. And if somebody has 20 acres.
without such land division being deemed development, is why he's insisting on it.
And I'm not arguing it should be here. I'm just saying what you referenced, okay, maybe should be reworded into saying into 5-acre parcels, rather than up to 3. Because that's somebody that had, because how many 15-acre parcels are there in Loxahatchee Groves?
well.
There's
well,
5s
it
and
says-
10s.
It says that you
20s.
can divide it, without going through the subdivision process, you can divide it into up to 3 parcels. And then in the zoning code, you have to have 5-acre parcels in order to create a lot. So, I mean, that's, you have to look in 2 different places, but it gets the job done. You can't create something less than 5 acres, but you can create as many 5-acre parcels as you want, as long as you go through the proper process.
But you have to look at it as a development. If you have a 20-acre parcel and want to split it into 5-acre parcels, it's considered development. And so you've got to go.
If you remove the sentence. it's
Right,
considered-
you have to go and ask some kind of special permission to do it. Whereas the person that has 10 acres and wants to split it up into 2 5s is not considered development. A person that has 15 acres and develops and splits it up into 3 5s is not considered development. Yet a person with 20 acres, which I would suggest is more common than people with 15-acre parcels, okay,
But
does
that's-
not have that same right, and that's what I believe is wrong, and that's,
Yeah, but the state statutes define how many parcels you can do without being considered development.
oh, that is limited to 3?
Yes.
Now, okay, so you have state statute saying it's limited to 3. Now, as a town, if we left this, we leave this in there, are not the property owners then protected by leaving that sentence in there? I'm just trying to understand.
Or leaving that sentence somewhere.
Well, I mean, you can leave it in if you want. I mean, it's.
But I'm just trying to understand, no, I'm trying to understand, well, that's what I'm trying to understand here. When you say, I see you, John. I'm trying to understand, we've got the state statute that says three properties, 3 divisions or less. We've got the town having this the comp plan having this sentence in there saying you could have 50 acres divided into 5-acre lots and it's not going to be considered development.
You just have to do a subdivision, that's all.
Well, let me ask you this. This is what I'm trying to understand. With this sentence in here, left in, if you had a 50-acre lot that you divide into 5 acres, you do not have, that's what I'm trying to understand here, the confusion. According to the town, you don't have to do a subdivision or be declared development, but according to the state, you do.
No, according to the town, if you do 4 or more, you have to do a subdivision.
Okay, and where does that, is that where you go back to P and Z? Because this doesn't
No,
say.
no. Well, if
See,
you
that's
want to keep on going, I'll find it.
You guys went way beyond where I'm going. All I'm telling
Okay.
you is this is not appropriate in the definition. It's almost, it reads, because it starts off, it reads, recognizing the right of property owners to subdivide their property into 5 acres. That's like a policy statement. That's like a purpose and intent statement. It doesn't belong in the definition.
No, but it says without being deemed development.
I agree it needs to be moved. I just disagree with it being deleted and
Well,
thrown
I'm
in.
not-
Yeah, I never said that. I said we work
Well,
it.
I'm not so sure I'm agreeing that it should be moved, because now that I read that, here's my concern, honestly, and I'm trying, that's why I'm asking Jim, and I know he wants to flag me on it, so we've gone too long on this. But this is a definition, and I guess for me, it's a problem, and you want to put it on your problem list. Because I see it as protecting the landowner. And again, I understand what you're saying, a state statute, they'll find something, you know, Jim, if you want it, we'll put it on the problem list and come back to it next meeting. John?
You have two things. One, Loxahatchee Groves was laid out in 20-acre parcels. Wasn't laid out in 15-acre parcels.
Right.
Now, maybe the get around is you put a time limit on it. You know, one year you can divide 20 acres into 1 10 and 2 5s. And the next year you take the 10 and divide that into 2 5s. What would be wrong with that?
Nothing would be wrong with it, but I'm not associating it with what you're talking about.
No, we're talking about the intent. We're talking about the intent of letting property owners divide their property.
You can do whatever you want,
5 acres.
but I'm just saying it's
The
not a
right.
definition of development, you know.
Let's just put it on the list and move on.
I have something else on this page. Completely enclosed building.
On that page?
Yes,
At
the
the
top,
top.
the very
Okay,
first,
yep,
the
yep.
very first. I take issue with and normal entrance or exit doors. I know there's plenty of buildings within Loxahatchee Groves that are completely enclosed, separate buildings that have nothing but a roll-up entry door for feed and hay deliveries and don't even have a pedestrian door. And this says normal entrance or exit doors. And I think something's wrong with that wording, especially since there's so many buildings in the Groves. I just went to great expense to put a pedestrian door in one of those type buildings. So,
Well, the word normal does make it a little,
weird,
yeah.
yeah. So that's,
Well, we can look to amend that if you want.
So let's suggest removing normal.
yeah,
And you
remove
would
the
be
word
fine.
normal and it's
You're
it's
fine. Okay, so completely enclosed buildings.
So you say by windows and or exit doors.
And or, right.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have windows. There's plenty of buildings and all the marijuana storage buildings didn't have windows.
Those are houses. They have lots of windows.
That's why they have heat sensors now from the planes.
There was one next door to me, and every new owner, I explained to them why there's no windows in that building, because the helicopters were here from the DEA.
All right, development, we're gonna table to, you know, you're suggesting that that last sentence be removed. We'd like it left on the problem list for further discussion by Jim in the future.
That's it.
In development, we'd like to put that on the list and review that last sentence based on Jim's suggestions in the future.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a big deal. If you want to leave it in, I mean, I
No,
have
no, we're saying,
problem.
we're saying let's put it on the problem list if you have comments in the next meeting or whenever, and we'll just continue on. And it'll give perhaps some of us time to refine our comment on it, to be more productive on that, okay? Anything else on that page? So we're on page 10-9?
10-9, the issues I had. District is the third one down. They end it with the term is short for zoning district. I'm not aware of district by itself, I don't know if Jim wants to weigh in, being automatically consumed to be construed to be a zoning district. Usually the words go together. A district by itself doesn't necessarily imply that it's automatically a zoning district. So, you know, I think that needs to be worked a little bit just to, if they really want to design, if they really want to define zoning district, there's a better way to define it than that.
Jim?
I agree with what Mark's saying.
That makes sense to everybody? So district, you wanna, it's on the problem list?
We'll work,
Right.
I mean, that's, you know, a good
Okay.
recommendation.
Yeah, drive-through facility, since we're gonna be having a fast food place, I guess, at the end of B Road.
That one, I didn't really flag as a problem, but you know, most codes will call it a drive-in facility, drive-through, drive-in, I mean, you know. It's really more of a nomenclature thing with that one.
That looks,
Dwelling, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I would suggest better definitions do mention the living, sleeping, those kinds of things. They actually define the rooms more specifically than this definition does. But I'm not saying it necessarily has to be amended. In dwelling single family is the next one I have a problem with. And if you read the last sentence, it says, single family dwellings shall not include trailer, mobile homes, rooming or boarding houses or dormitories, fraternities or sororities. And I underline trailer mobile homes because I'm not sure what they were getting at there. Because there really is a difference between a trailer and a mobile home. Although mobile homes are considered by many to be trailers, but trailers, you can get into travel trailers and there's all kinds of different classifications. So I think what they were really talking about was they meant mobile homes. A single family dwelling should not include a mobile home as a single family. Now, I mean, that's, you know, a lot of places do consider mobile homes as a single family dwelling. A lot of places consider townhouses as single family dwellings, but they're attached to single family dwellings as opposed to detached. So it kind of, and you know, not having been here, I'm not sure, maybe some of you are aware of what they were trying to accomplish, but it's a real sloppy definition.
I think there needs to be a comment in there. There's people that use a travel trailer as their primary residence.
Which is not, yeah, which you're not supposed to do.
Which I think that is trying to refer to.
Could be, could be.
Should we say a single, because we also discussed previously, in the future, we're going to be talking about the possible permit, I don't know if we call it permitting it, but possible permission of, what are those RV, the large travel trailers that come in for the season? The fifth wheel. So,
Well, Howard's point is good if you want to call it travel trailers. I think
Yeah.
that gets to what you're concerned.
Or RVs.
Yes.
That would be, yeah, or recreational vehicles, yeah.
We have a definition of trailer, so if we just struck mobile homes and then just had it as trailers.
Well, they wanted mobile homes to be in here, but it
Right.
shouldn't be. because-
Yeah, I think a special,
That's
special.
what I'm saying.
Special exception.
Right.
Right. So we're
Strike
gonna,
mobile home.
yeah, strike, he says
And then
shall
just
not,
leave trailer.
shall not include travel trailers.
Yeah, well, yeah, we have a definition of trailer, which covers what he's talking about.
But you said single-family dwelling shall not include travel trailers.
Yeah, you can't just put trailer,
Right.
Okay, we're talking about what it should not include.
right?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, we already have a definition of trailer in here, which covers what you're saying, so we don't need to say travel trailer, we just need to say trailer.
Sure. Okay, well, we have to see the definition of trailer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about, I'm sure.
Okay, so hold on.
So we're going to work on that then. Again, you don't have to come up with a solution tonight. All you got to do is say, yeah, it's a problem. We'll rework it.
Well, the title of that definition is wrong. I have a trailer that is used for hauling hay. I have there's trailer used for hauling horses. And this talks about a trailer that's meant as a travel trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't live in the trailer that you lug your hay or your
No,
horse.
of course not. But
Some,
I'd like
So
to
this
say
trailer,
trailer,
I think-
a trailer is a generic, you say trailer, everybody thinks something else.
All right,
Well, so I said travel trailer or recreational vehicle trailer. I mean, you want to.
Okay.
Exactly.
okay, so we're gonna get back to trailers on 1020, and then back on 10:9, single-family dwelling shall not include
Wait a minute, are we saying also that we don't want to include mobile homes here? Or do we want to leave them there? They are treated separately as a special exception item.
They are. Yeah.
Right. So,
I think we need to eliminate it from that particular.
from a special exception.
No, eliminate it from here because it's saying that mobile homes are not single-family dwellings, and they
Yeah,
are.
it's saying should not. See, it's limited.
with the special exception.
Right, but that's the only thing they should be used for with the special exception. But to just say they're not single-family dwellings when that's exactly what they are, the special exception is not consistent. You're saying here that you don't want rooming houses, boarding houses, dormitories, fraternities, sororities. You're really talking about uses of dwellings, not dwellings. And so I question all of that as to whether or not it should even be in there or move to someplace else. I mean, it's,
I think they should rewrite it and see what they come up
who's they? That's us.
with. No, management can rewrite it, come and say, look, these are the definitions we think would fit it.
It's exactly a perfect example of what Mark lectured us about right from the get-go. All it does is say what it's not, and it regulates, and it really doesn't define.
Okay, it's a
Well, to
problem.
go with it.
It's on the problem list,
Alright.
let's continue. Dwelling
Alright.
unit, any,
On dwelling unit, same thing, Howard just took the words out of my mouth, that you're regulating because you're saying a group of rooms not less than 400 square feet in total floor area. I'm not even sure if that would pass building code issues. I think you can have a unit that's 400 square feet. It's small, but, you know,
I
but putting the number in and regulating through the definition is not the way to go. So,
so that's on the problem list then. All right, employment agency.
I don't have a problem with that. That's it for me to say.
Oh, environment.
On this page, I had one, and obviously, I have a real problem with the equestrian. I don't think it's a very good definition at all. It says of, relating to, or featuring horseback riding.
I had a big issue with that.
Okay,
I had a big issue with it, but I'm gonna,
I think we can come up with a better definition.
well, hold on. Here's, I think, I know exactly where this definition came from. Merriam-Webster, of, relating to, or featuring horseback riding.
A lot of thought was put into it, is what you're saying, and a lot of thought put into that. Okay.
Yeah, it's much broader than that.
I personally would say is of, relating to, or
Featuring
which is
horses.
of,
Any activities relating to
equine,
horses.
to equine animals, because you have donkeys, mules, and all that.
Okay, featuring, of, relating to, or featuring
Equine.
equine.
And of course, the next one.
Equines.
Okay, so we're changing,
Plural.
equestrian, is that satisfactory?
We rework. The next one, equipment, farm, and land cultivation, farm and land cultivation equipment. Why do we need it? Just go to that definition if you want to, you know, so. I think we can remove it. That's all I have for 1010. Something else?
Family.
Illicit marriage.
Go ahead.
It's a good one. I didn't catch that one. It's a good one. Because again, all it does is tell you two Florida statutes and doesn't tell you what they say. So it doesn't really help you. You have to do more research to find out what the definition is.
I got a problem with family, let's rework that. Let's look at that, get some input.
I'm not sure what it's saying.
It says you can only be married or be related. You can't, two people cannot live together, right? Am I in
That's
a
the ordinance
nutshell?
3.
It doesn't say you can't live together, it just says you're not family.
Yeah.
You're not kin
That-
for the rest of us in my bedroom.
Right, so that means, and that has a lot of implications.
No, wait a minute, it says a
Sure
group
does.
of persons that are disabled.
Right.
They don't have to be illicit married or blood or.
Yeah, so we need to rework that.
So what happens if you have a unit that contains 8 people that are not related and they don't have a disability? And they happen to be right next to you and you don't like it, John, because you think nefarious activities are going on there. And our definition doesn't support you, help you now.
Especially if they keep coming in and out.
Well,
But they also.
why would we need the definition of family? For what you're saying there?
Well, historically and generically, family, years ago, they used to define family in codes because it was pretty much the basic family unit. And they were trying to, especially in a lot of cities and
Immigration.
jurisdictions where they had colleges and dormitories, and they'd get into all kinds of living arrangements with people. And they were trying to, family, it was guarded for the purposes of property protection and zoning. And the definition over time has continued to become more liberal because of the various living arrangements we have with those homeless people and how they cohabitate. It's pretty hard to really regulate in that area these days. So It's really more as it relates to nuisance and, you know, if you have a situation. And it was really designed to protect against overcrowding, is probably the main reason. Where, you know, somebody will complain, or made a code enforcement complaint, there are 25 people living in a house, and, you know, I mean, they're very, from a code, they're even worse than noise, because you almost have to stake out the property and watch it, and watch cars going by, who's going in and all that kind of stuff.
Do you have any problem with this, or is this the accepted standard, or any comments?
One of the principal uses in our AR zoning district is single-family residence or dwelling. So I guess on that basis alone, we have to have a definition of what family is.
I think it's important, the family definition. I do think it needs to be reworded, but in my line of business, if you're a family or not family, it's very, very important, so.
I mean, we could rework it if we want.
Okay,
We
so
could
put it
it
on the
and
list,
rework it.
yeah, all right, just, John?
Yeah, I think that one issue we've got out here is the fact that there are a lot of non-standard housing properties. They're not formally boarding houses, but they're properties which migrant farm workers live in, and they aren't family. And
That's right.
you know, we've had some complaints. I think, you know, one I recall is off of C Road, a lady that basically was putting 4 or 5 travel trailers on her property and just renting them out to migrant workers. So I think if we got single-family dwellings on 5 acres, that it would be important to have a workable definition. I think this one is just kind of a strange definition.
Okay, so we're all in agreement, we'll give some input on the next. I mean, we may end up keeping it, who knows, but at least we'll look at it and come up with some, you know, it seems everyone wants to tweak this one a little bit. Okay, family daycare home?
Oh, that was the one I was just mentioning, that, you know, it just simply states a statute number.
We'll just stick to that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and we talked a little bit about that last week. We've got to be careful because, you know, you're probably better off being more generic as defined in Florida statute. But that doesn't help you either unless you put some wording.
Right. But this is also regulated by the county. This is regulated by the county, so we don't have to really.
It is, but let me tell you probably why they felt they had to put it in. And we do run into this a bit in the office sometimes when people come in. Because of the fact that many areas got very snobbish in terms of allowing what's considered group homes, and regardless of whether they're there because they have an illness or they have a substance abuse or recovery or whatever the issue is. And what the state did in 419 is they pretty much got tired of cities not, you know, allowing these uses or making it very difficult for them to locate in the community, so they have an override. And it's, guys, help me out, 5 units or 6 more? What is it?
6.
We have one in the town, don't we?
Yeah. It's, you know, so anything under 6, they can automatically come in, there's a state override, we can't do anything about it. We have to permit them. So I suspect that's probably why they were trying to define it, but they just, you know, didn't do a good job or whatever. And I'm talking about 419, they're actually talking about 402, 313, so we'd have to look at that.
So
And
you
see that distinction where they're going.
Yeah.
So you do want to look at it then, Jim?
Yeah, they've got a fairly lengthy definition in 403 as to what
You mean 402?
402.302, yeah.
When you read that, you just
Okay.
know what it's saying.
Family daycare home means an occupied residence in which child care is regularly provided for children from at least 2 unrelated families and which receives a payment fee or grant for any of the children receiving care, whether or not operated for profit. Household children under 13 years of age when on the premises of the family daycare home or on a field trip with children enrolled in child care shall be included in the overall capacity of the licensed home, so you're right, it's licensed. A family daycare home shall be allowed to provide care for one of the following groups of children, and which shall include household children under 13 years of age. Maximum of 4 children from birth to 12, maximum of 3 from birth maximum of 3 children from birth to 12 months of age, and other children for maximum total of 6. Maximum of 6 preschools, a maximum of 10 if no more than 5 are preschool and 5. So they have a lot of really specific.
Yeah, so
So
basically,
should-
that's
Looks
not,
like
that's
6.
not, yeah, that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm
We
talking
should-
about 419, but what that is, it appears that that's, there's again, a whole bunch of statutes
This is
that deal with all
child
these kinds of
daycare.
care.
Yeah.
It's
Let me-
childcare.
Right, so should we
No, this is
insert,
family daycare. The definition that I read was family daycare.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's a form of childcare. but
right,
it's
so
not-
Yeah.
my question, based on what you just read, and nowhere in there does it refer to adult daycare.
Yeah, senior daycare.
So my question is, should we insert family child daycare to distinguish that this is, it sounds to me like it's strictly
What
related
is
to
it-
children.
What is it
Well,
called?
Because we have
I
adult
don't think
daycare.
we should make the term any different than it specifically referenced in the state statutes.
Okay, because how is adult care, daycare referenced in state statutes?
They have adult daycare. Is it permanent care? Is it not?
No,
The statute is health
No,
and,
there's adult daycare.
the statute is actually called Health and Human Services Miscellaneous
Well,
Provisions.
and what
So
I'm
you see
trying to
it's getting into real
understand
nuances
is
there.
what is the difference between adult daycare and this statute you just read?
It's licensed under different programs.
So the term is, so family daycare can apply, home can apply to children or adults?
No,
Okay.
no, just family daycare home
Children,
can contain
Up to
these
13.
4 groups.
but it's minor.
Essentially 6, but up to 10 in certain circumstances.
But the age is what I'm focusing
Yes.
on. Okay, so in our definitions anywhere, is there something for adult daycare? Did I miss it? You know, for this, because as we progressed in society and become more attuned to the needs of family, we now have daycare for anybody over 18 and up.
Well, we have as a permitted use, CLF, congregate living facility, and that's sort of a broad.
That's a permanent facility. I'm talking about, there are places like in West Palm Beach, there was
right.
something called the leisure club where you could drop people off during the daytime
You're right.
and then pick them up.
So that means anybody can do it at all, you don't need anything special.
See, the thing is, though, Jim has just raised a good point. See, we don't define a living facility.
Ah.
We don't define it, and that's a
Do we
major,
need-
that's a major
but
one.
Do we need
And,
to?
yeah.
Oh,
It's
Mark,
listed
you
as a
missed
permitted
that
one.
one.
And,
Okay, I'm sorry. We have adult daycare facility defined on page 10,
Okay.
10:4.
10 what?
10:4,
Okay, we missed
page
it then.
21 of 9.
Okay, well,
Daycare facility, again.
Yeah, so that was
okay,
one.
but adolescents, it includes adolescents then, or adults, or do physical or mental ones, okay. So we're good there. My concern was just if we had to insert the word child here, but you're saying no. But now you brought up the point that he's all worked up on.
I'm not worked up, but in a lot of codes, what I have seen, especially in the state of Florida, is when you start talking about congregate living, and what they do is they do a very large definition, generic, and they break it up into parts, and they identify all these homes because of all these little nuances that pretty much come down from the state.
We have community residential facility. Is that different from what you're talking about?
It isn't, well, it isn't, the Florida statute makes a distinction, but it's like a congregate living facility.
Yeah, the way the county did, the county.
Okay, we're
It's warm in here.
done with our break and we're back to resuming the meeting where we left off on page 1013.
Did you want
And
to discuss
Jim-
an operating time for the meeting tonight?
For tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to try and continue through at a faster pace. And I've asked Jim to flag us, be our referee. And Mark? Yes. So let's pay attention to Jim if he feels we're going off, because we're trying again to flag the issues that we're going to come back to in the future. We also, before the break, Susan asked for us to clarify some comments. Jim, on
Okay.
accessory dwelling.
Okay, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to delete section 20-15. That's the table of uses for the AR district. We're going to delete that. We're going to keep caretaker's quarter because that is an umbrella definition that we feel covers rooms quarter as well.
No, cover being in the barn.
Yeah. We're going to delete guest cottage from page 10, 12. And we're going to revise the definition of accessory dwelling unit to, well, expand it to include that residence in an accessory dwelling unit is limited to employees or family members of the owner of the unit.
Of the property.
Of the property.
And must be on one electric meter?
That's already in there, I believe.
Okay, so
That's okay.
is that satisfactory to everyone?
One quick, we got a lot of properties that aren't owned by individuals.
Good point.
Oh.
To the landowner then perhaps?
To the majority, to the property owner or
And/or leasehold.
majority owner through a trustee.
Yeah, how do you do, you're basically referring that all landowners are covered under this is what you're trying to
Right.
say. So what would be the proper terminology?
Well, I would say the owner of the property is still.
Property owner would be
It's still
sufficient?
appropriate. Yeah, because
Well,
the owner can be a corporation or.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't have necessarily relatives of a corporation. Relatives of the majority.
Yeah, okay, well, we're not putting homestead in there, I guess, so that would.
Okay, I see John's point now. So if a corporation, because we did, so you could have an employee, so the corporation would have employees, so they would be covered. Would anybody not be covered? If it's, if a corporation or a trust owns the property, it would be,
Well, don't you think if we use the term owner, that covers it?
I guess you're right, if it's an employee.
because by the use of the term
Okay,
employees
okay.
or trust employee, because if it's a trust, you have to say trust.
Employees or family members is.
Okay, because the trust doesn't necessarily have employees, that's the one concern.
It could.
Sure.
Well, no, it
That's an
could,
entity.
a trust can have employees, of course, but a trust may not have employees, so it's usually in the benefit of a family. So how do you make sure that somebody doesn't come look at this and say, oh, well, that's a trust, they can't have that? That's all I'm saying while we're having this discussion.
You still have to be a property owner. The trust is the property owner.
Yeah. And the
Right,
trust
but we're
has
saying
employees.
they're family or employees. So, okay. Relation, okay.
Family or employees of the property owner.
Okay, so we're not eliminating anyone.
The only question that still lingers in my mind is that, didn't we recently, when we were looking at hay sales, say they had to be on homesteaded property?
Yes.
Where the owners live on the property that's homesteaded. Now here, we're kind of going away from that.
Yeah, but by saying owner, that,
That
it
gives you.
does not have
I
to,
guess.
it does not have to have a homestead exemption.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that satisfactory then?
Yeah.
All right, we're coming back to it anyway, it's just, all right, let's continue.
What page are we on, 13?
Well, the first one I have is actually covers 1012 and 1013.
Go ahead.
And that's the home office at the bottom of 1012, and it goes on to 1013. You may remember we had the issue that John was just referring to, having to do with the hay sales, which led to discussions about the residential enterprise and home occupations. And obviously, this definition is regulating through the home occupation, home office is regulating through the definition. So what we'll probably want to do is rework the definition as well as any appropriate provisions we have to, which will be maybe occurring very soon anyway.
For home occupation or home office, just home office?
Probably home office, home occupation, and residential enterprise.
But yeah, what you're talking about, eliminating residential enterprise or folding it into.
Or
home office,
amending it, or amending it.
Or folding it into home
Yeah.
office.
Yeah. The problem with residential enterprise is that issue about the business or whatever activity being conducted within the accessory structure.
I mean, I thought the resolution of the discussions was gearing to focus on home office and not have that separate.
Yeah, the alternative that I recommended to the council was to actually take a look at all three of them and see what we do with it, the residential enterprise, the home office, and the home occupation. And that would address all new, current or prospective. And then the second part of that was allow us to do what they directed us to do as a result of the hay being put on indefinite hold, and that is to take a look at the suggestion that this committee through Howard came up with, and come up with, which I don't know if we're going to call historical legacy, but we're going to work on that and come up with something, and that kind of addresses the folks that were here.
But even with, going back to what we were talking about with Howard, I thought we were talking about kind of combining those three.
That may be the case, yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't say that unequivocally, but that's where we were, we're
So,
looking.
residential enterprises has not been, did we have the first reading or the second reading on the residential
It was
enterprises?
tabled at the second reading.
So it was tabled, okay, I didn't catch it, okay. All
They're
right.
just holding it in advance until they see what we come up with.
Okay, so
The
page,
only question I have on this one is Grace Joyce brought up a really good example of one of the planning and zoning board meetings of someone giving piano lessons.
And that-
Where they would have a student come into their home and give a lesson on piano. I don't think that kind of business is covered in this. And I'm just wondering how the
it's
committee
not,
feels about including businesses like that in our office.
Yeah, that was one of the things we actually suggested to town council too. That's why we need to look at home office. This home office is kind of like an internet kind of thing, more like, it seems like the way it's drafted for just to conduct computer usage and things like that, where home occupation, you can get into some occupations where you actually do need the client, if you will, the music lessons,
CPA or the tax
to come to
preparer.
the, yeah.
The math tutor. But the home
Tutor, that's
office,
another thing,
home
yeah.
office is separable under IRS code to a certain extent. I have a yearly deduction for home office, because I have an office in my home that I use for my business.
Sure.
That's your principal.
And as you know, the internet created a,
business. Yeah.
the internet created a whole industry whereby people will,
So
they're merchants. I know they take orders through the internet, they may have their, whether they have the product there at their structure or somewhere else, and they mail order it out.
and that was an example, actually, somebody in the audience that night, I'm gonna get back to your example on the piano lessons, but they said, well, why doesn't the ammo individual, they said, why doesn't he just do mail order? Someone said to me, just do mail order, and he has his business, so it's not, I don't have enough information about if that would be of a benefit to him or not, but you're talking about the home occupation as regarding piano lessons
Well,
or home office?
Or things like that, yeah. Yeah, the home office, because home office right now precludes patrons. You can't have anybody come to your house.
But what about home occupation?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, home occupation is conducting.
Nobody coming to you.
Well, home occupation and home office, I think, are one
Here's
and
the
same.
problem, home
The
occupation.
occupation is what occurs in the office.
But look at the definition of home occupation too, conduct of a business in a home office. So Jim was right, it's kind of saying that, but yet it's,
Okay,
Okay,
so you
I
want
would
to
disagree,
rework,
because home office is a home office. It's not an occupation. I don't,
No, that's true.
okay.
you're right.
And so they need to be separated.
Yeah.
Home occupation needs to have a definition. It doesn't say it's the same as home office.
That's correct.
Well, but home occupation.
That's where we put
occurs
in the
in
math
a home
tutors,
office.
the accountants,
Yeah, exactly.
so we're gonna put this on the list to.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm just asking, do you think that we should expand the definition to include businesses like that? Like-
I think we need
Yeah.
to put a separate definition for
They need to
home
be
occupation.
protected. It's not a massive amount of people. If you want to limit the and again,
It's an individual service.
that's the wording.
That's it, individual service.
Yeah, individual service as opposed to random customers coming in to conduct a business. It's an individual service.
By appointment or
Yeah.
something like that, yeah.
Piano, like you're saying, piano lesson after teach you
Okay.
so much how to load their bullet into their gun. Which was he could give bullet lessons and get around it. I don't know what the problem was.
There's something there that doesn't.
How to clean your gun.
The town has spent $10,000 trying
Hey,
to
don't
get to sell
Don't
3
start
guns a year.
sounding like me. You're starting to sound like me. You yell at me when I say that.
No, you
Okay,
guys are under the.
let's go.
And I do. That's all I have for 10:13.
Okay. Anybody else? Kennels, privates, any kitchen complete, anything?
Kennels, please.
10:13.
My question right off the bat is if we're going to eliminate guest cottage, are we eliminating hotel for the same reason?
Hotel, I believe, is allowed use in the commercial district.
Oh, okay, I forgot to, okay.
Madam Chair, while he's looking at
Yeah,
it. Good?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't mention it, but I did have it circled. When you have a definition like kitchen, comma, complete, we don't have kitchen, comma, limited, or anything else, so you would question why you need to complete. I don't think we need that, so we could, if you want, we could rework that and take it out.
I think that was, I would guess that that is in there because of my reference earlier to Palm Beach County Code said that a mother-in-law's quarters cannot have a kitchen. Okay, however, you've seen, I forget what they call them in hotels. They call them kitchenette.
Kitchenettes, yeah, that's really what it's doing. But,
That's what it's doing.
but then we should have kitchenette defined, if that's the case.
Or you can get the dishwasher with the stove on top and the little sink.
Household pet, I got a problem with. The USDA, and I believe we should go on them, differentiates animals, birds, and reptiles. Now, you want to keep it as animals, as an animal, vegetable, mineral.
What would you want it to say?
Any animal, bird, or reptile that resides in the dwelling with its owner kept for companionship and enjoyment.
Let's not put reptile in there.
That's because you don't like the idea, neither do I. But
We
that
got
doesn't
iguanas
mean
running around in town.
What's wrong with this definition? You want it more specific? Is that what you're saying?
I wanted to say animal, bird, or reptile.
Okay. What about amphibians? Should we put amphibians over frogs too? It's elephant. I'm just asking. I mean, you're the one that's getting real particular. Make sure you put fish in there as well.
No.
They're not reptiles. They're not
Is
amphibians.
animal and all
I think animal covers it.
Let me ask you this, is animal used as a generic,
all-encompassing term in this instance, or do we need to?
Well, you would go to the Webster's, because I don't think we define an animal.
Hey, how about non-human living?
Sorry, define animal. Back to the A's, are we? Do we need to define animal?
An animal is defined as anything that comes from
Three different ways.
Yeah.
Domesticated, large and small.
Oh, Howard, wait a minute, Howard, wasn't that where Howard piped in? What page was it?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, what page was it? Remind us.
That's where we talked about the body weights, remember?
Howard
Oh,
was,
that's right.
what, could you
I
tell me
know you
what
were
page
trying to
you're
trip me
on?
up, Madam Chair. I didn't.
What was that?
10-5.
10-5, let's refresh Howard's memory. 10-5. Animal. Oh, yeah, this was your topic, wasn't it? Animal domesticated, animal large, animal small. Did we have notes there?
Yeah, you agreed, I believe, let's see.
Would you like to know what an animal is?
Yes, please.
Animal large needs to be deleted, animal small needs to be deleted, animal
Is a living
needs to
organism
be,
that
and
feeds on
animal
organic matter.
domesticated needs to be reconsidered.
And
Okay, here you go. A living organism that feeds on organic matter, typically having specialized sense organs and nervous system and able to respond rapidly.
human being.
We're an animal.
But is an animal a pet? Not always.
No, but that's what it says. No, not always.
Okay, Howard, so
All
now
right, so
we're back at.
So if we're going to use that definition, then that's fine.
Well, the other one too, to think about is an animal that resides in a dwelling, in the dwelling. I mean, there are a lot of people I know that have dogs and cats, and they either have a dog house, or it's not in the.
Usually where I see.
Or cat, the cat's never there, it just comes to eat and then goes, you know. So-
But it's not necessarily a household pet.
A household pet does not have to reside in your dwelling.
Yeah.
That's just a pet. It's not a household pet.
Back in the condos,
People have pet squirrels. Like my neighbor across the street has a pet squirrel. It comes out of the tree, it sits with him on his patio, he feeds it peanuts, they enjoy time together, and then he goes in and the squirrel goes up the tree. Bill Gurney.
Why do we need to, okay, let me ask.
We're really going, we're gonna spend another half an hour on household
Okay,
pet,
but
really, guys?
Jim,
Come on.
Sergeant Arms.
Jim,
Jim,
All right, let's
move
move
on.
on, let's move on.
okay,
Thank you.
yeah, do we even have to define household pet? Is there
No.
any legal purpose in
I
this
do
fact?
have a note, I'm not sure the need for it, but I didn't flag it as a problem. Not sure.
And that brings up that it could be eliminated, does he, put it on the list, just to review
Okay.
next time, if it should just be eliminated or if it's necessary to keep.
Okay. Eliminate or reward, probably that covered. What did you want to do with complete kitchen? Do you want to leave the complete there?
Is there a reason to have complete kitchen for anything anywhere? Since if, from what Howard's saying, it had to do with the mother-in-law's thing, and we've already figured out that an adjacent,
Accessory
the
building,
accessory building is,
1 meter.
doesn't matter if there's a kitchen in there or not.
It's talking about the kitchenettes in hotels where sometimes you might have maybe one or the other, because it talks, that providing food storage, preparation, sink with water, refrigerator, conventional gas, electric range. So it's a basic kitchen is what they're describing.
But you want to just take the word complete out.
Yeah, that's what I would. You
And-
want to take it out?
Do you, and you do need the definition of kitchen left in?
Sure.
I'm
Okay.
just curious.
Under our current definition of a dwelling unit, we have, one of the components is complete kitchen, so,
So that's why you need kitchen
Complete,
left.
complete.
yeah, I guess we need to leave it in.
Okay. Right, moving on.
I don't know, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, I would say kitchen, probably the other definition just said kitchen, but, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, 1014, you ready to go?
1014, mobile home.
Oh, wait a minute, you, what about livestock?
No, that fits under that
I'm just
585.
checking that.
I'm here already.
I'm not gonna let you pass that one. Are you okay with livestock?
I'm tickled with it.
Mobile home needs to be changed.
Reactions,
What change would you suggest?
Well, a mobile home here in Florida does not have to have heating or air conditioning to be defined as a mobile home.
Oh, we reviewed this before.
Yeah, we did, we were gonna come back to it.
Okay, so mobile homes on the list, and we were eliminating heating.
Well,
I think
heating and air
that-
conditioning.
Okay.
This says, basically, if you don't have heat and air conditioning, it's not defined as a mobile home.
Well, we also have trailer and we have recreational vehicle.
It's not a mobile home.
So we have three definitions that,
But they're different.
But all different.
I know they are,
Right.
and that's what I'm saying, is that maybe we shouldn't mess with mobile home then, since we have definitions, two other definitions that may cover what you're saying.
No, it
No,
doesn't.
no.
What I'm saying is I lived in a mobile home, a broken down mobile home for over a decade that had no heat.
And by definition here, if it doesn't have any heat, then it's no longer mobile.
Exactly.
What about the AC?
Well, yeah.
The AC would be similar. I
But,
mean, it's
but I mean, do we want to allow,
mobile homes without heat? Sure.
those kind of facilities without the full range of facilities that we're talking about under the definition? I mean, taking out heat, I
Well,
don't think that's a big deal,
Yeah,
but the rest of the.
Oh, no, I'm only talking heat and air conditioning.
Okay.
Okay, but I had it flagged too, for a different reason,
Okay.
and we kind of addressed it tonight, because if you notice in the middle, second line, it says, to be used as a dwelling,
When
and
connected?
connected to. But remember, earlier this evening, we talked about dwelling single family, and that's where it says, single family dwelling shall not include trailer or mobile homes, and that's why I said, I think we want to take mobile home out, because they're probably talking about a trailer, or a rec trailer,
Right.
and not a mobile, but you can see, it's very close where you have inconsistencies in the definitions unless we work to get this.
So let's go, so just put a note that we need to take, possibly maybe take mobile
Mobile
home
home
out of the
out.
other section.
Yeah, and then
I
take
think you already
heating
did.
out of this one.
Heating and air conditioning.
Heating and air conditioning.
Yes.
Are the windows okay? Do we
Honestly,
need
there's
windows?
people in Florida live without air conditioning.
But we're gonna have windows, right, in this trailer that you're creating, this mobile home? I just wanna make sure it's gonna have windows.
Where does it say windows in here?
I don't know.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm wondering what kind of building it is.
No.
Is it a container? Is this, well, I'm just wondering what you're creating here.
Containers are pretty cool.
But my point is, you see no mention of windows.
Yep, but they mentioned air conditioning, right?
Right, so,
So a 40-foot container would
Would work.
yeah, that's what, I'm not being
Thank you.
facetious, I'm being serious. There's no mention of windows or doors.
Well, so then
Well,
you
it doesn't have a
say
door, when you get in there, that's it, you
constructed for the purpose of a habitable dwelling.
It has to be, because basically if you don't have, you're referring to a container unit.
Let me play Jim for a second. We said we're gonna rework it, so let's move on.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about
Thank you, sir.
fixing it right
Thank
now.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Continue.
The next couple that I have, and it gets to that plot thing that I was talking to you about. We have non-conforming plot, non-residential plot, and I'm saying, in that case, those could be lot, or, you know, non-residential, lot or parcel or plat.
Plot.
Yeah, not plot. That's very archaic.
welcome to Loxahatchee Cove.
I never said that. Don't go there. And then the next one I have is the non-residentially zoned land. I mean, it's really not significant. It's land or water area within any zoning district other than the AR. I mean, come on, we don't really need that. But if you want to keep it in, we can keep it in.
What is the purpose of having?
I don't know. I tried to figure it out myself. I don't. Jim, how did you want to take a stab at it?
No, I'm not looking for a lengthy discussion, I'm just a,
But is
Any
is that
purpose
like
or not?
parks,
yes or no?
parks or?
It's everything else but the AR. Is really what
But
it's.
you're saying it's,
I mean, I can't see what we would need it for in ever.
next.
Well, I mean, you have commercial, you
I
have,
mean, the only thing that I can think of is that back when the town was writing its comprehensive plan, they did a couple others, like the neighborhood plan and a couple other things, and they talked about allowing low-intensity, non-residential uses in certain areas of the town. And this sort of fits back with that language, but other than that, I can't think of anything.
but from a current planning and zoning system, does it serve any benefit? Is it needed?
Probably not.
Okay, so we'll look at it as possibly being eliminated. I mean, unless you can find some reason to keep it.
Anything else on that page, then?
You could, just in a quick question, because my point being, places like Vince Ramos or, you know, that aren't, those are commercial low. When a place like Vince Ramos, what is that considered?
What's the specific?
The equestrian facility for the handicap?
And not the profit on the collecting now. Or 6 quarters.
It's an equestrian facility?
Yeah, it's the handicap, the equestrian facility for the handicap that has that large steel building on it.
Structure. Does it have a special exception use permit?
Pardon?
Does it have a special exception use permit?
I would guess not.
It's a non-profit commercial equestrian.
So I'm just,
Well,
because we're
okay,
speaking
I
of
mean,
non-residentially zoned
At the
land.
last meeting, you asked me to give you a couple examples of what a nonprofit community recreational facility would be,
Right,
and I suppose it could fall into that.
okay. Now, the non-profit community recreational facility, does it have any necessity to be defined as non-residentially zoned land? Does that benefit in any way or no, or it's not
No.
needed?
No, because it'll be it'll be a listed use in the zoning district that it's
Okay.
allowed.
Which is right underneath, this is not-for-profit corporation.
Yeah, the only question I have on that for your consideration is in the not-for-profit, should we require that it be a 501c corporation?
Are there not different types of
Under the
non-for?
Yeah,
And your point being, could you
Well-
clarify on the 501c?
well, that's an IRS classification for.
Right, and then,
For nonprofit corporations, and it gives it gives us a little more security in terms of making sure that business actually is not a nonprofit corporation.
Well, I thought all, maybe, I thought all nonprofits were 501Cs.
It says as defined by Florida statute
No.
617. Do you know that? Was 617 part of that?
There's different categories.
Yeah.
There's 501c3,
You just have to name on Jupiter.
you know, some other.
Yeah, but they're all 501c something, or they're not?
Yeah,
You can be
so-
yeah, that's right, there's like a 501c, I think 8 or 9
So, John,
categories.
what he is saying then is there any not-for-profit that would not be a 501c that you would know of?
Yeah, there is. Because,
What?
well, there was a business, I sit on the planning commission up in Jupiter, and there was a not-for-profit corporation that came into town, and the town, this was not a nationally recognized corporation, it was sort of a new business, they wanted to make sure that it was in fact a nonprofit corporation, so they required that it get the 501c3 that classification from the IRS. It's just it's another way to ensure that they're acting as they're presenting themselves.
You know, I'd have to go back and look. I know I was familiar with one because I was treasurer of United States Swimming, competitive swimming club, and we were 501c3, and we had to file a return each year,
Right.
you know, to confirm the status.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will put this on the list for possible.
I think under 617, I don't believe that requires that you be a
501c category.
So let's put it on the list, and if John can
Right.
provide some input, and then
It's just a better way of ensuring that we have
Exactly.
a good user.
I agree with you, and I guess I'm just looking to hear if there's any reason not to do that, and it seems like it's a benefit to do that. Ten, 15?
In 1015, I just have a couple in tandem, and that's the parking facility, full circulation, and parking facility, partial circulation.
Does this have to do with poor design of a parking lot?
I don't know, I want to look at them a little more, I mean.
Okay, so you're gonna
Because I mean,
review those.
there's not a good reason to have a partial circulation, you know, I mean.
Okay.
Every park must have a full circulation pattern, so.
All right, so you'll put those on the list to review,
Review.
come back with your input.
Anything else on 1015?
Let's see. Ten, 16?
1016 is my favorite.
Word, yep.
I do have,
Oh, John?
yeah, I do have one question before we leave that page. I think the last sentence under nursery is absolutely correct, but I think that we've got a recognized business
Oh, wow.
that we call lawn and landscape maintenance business on Okeechobee. Now, what's the definition of that?
That's a whole different ball of wax, because that's under code enforcement, that's Valley Crest, that
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
But I mean, we've approved that as a
Yeah, but
recognized use.
so they were cited for operating as a use that's not allowed under the town's code. But
But we recognize lawn and landscape.
no, as a matter of fact, there's language in the AR district that says that those uses are expressly prohibited.
Right, now,
The sentence isn't bad though, all it's doing is, it's not, because it's saying that it.
Oh, I leave it there.
Yeah,
I
it's.
leave it there, but I
yeah.
couldn't find the definition of lawn
Oh,
and
yeah, we
landscape.
don't have one, we don't have one, we need.
Really?
I think we need one, because we've got a lot of lawn and landscape businesses out here.
Yeah, well, that's something we're gonna have to think about, because, let me read you the sentence out of the code here. This is in the AR district. Irrigation installation, maintenance operations, and landscape maintenance operations are expressly prohibited in the AR district.
Okay, that I think.
How that ever got in there, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either, because that's inconsistent with tons of businesses out here.
Right, and it's consistent with the community, it's consistent with the community, and when we're fighting to have commercial along Okeechobee, and it
Right,
seems,
that's one of the logical things that can be there.
And one of
and
the
then you
things
have them landscape the front of their property or something.
Right.
we have made the determination that you can have chipping and mulching as an accessory to your nursery.
Only if you're feeding your nursery operation.
That's correct, you can't be bringing in stuff from out the outside.
But I mean, that's totally separate. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of lawn and landscape business because we've got an awful lot of that out here.
Right, because right now they have to have if they want to be lawn and landscape, they have to have a nursery on their property, and sometimes they do better, and instead of having a fake nursery, instead of going through that facade, let them function and have their business and make their money, and
Well, just like the property at the corner of B and Okeechobee, it's basically an irrigation contractor that's got a few palm trees in front.
which one is that? Is that the big building or G&G?
It's
The
the
big
one right next to.
The west,
Chocolate chip cookie.
Next to Nancy Freed Tobin's place.
yes, the west side of the B road.
Yeah, the west side, northwest corner. I mean, and that really is, a business that's been here a while, not forever.
You got here after we incorporated.
Yeah, but,
Yeah, it just-
I think it's there, and it is kind of like a lawn and landscape business, and that's what Vila was operating until we shut the irrigation portion down. So, I mean, I think we got some inconsistencies or incompatibilities with businesses that are out here and have been out here for quite a while and are not inconsistent with the character of the community.
Well, it almost sounds like a bigger problem than definitions that we'll have to discuss. We probably will be discussing in future meetings when we get to that topic. I mean, that's not even a rework.
I mean, I think at least we ought to have a definition of a lawn and landscape
Definitely,
business.
definitely.
And, I think there's no question in my mind, but everybody that does that also includes.
Well, that
some
struck me when I
irrigation
first looked at the
services.
code, because that is the only use that we call out and say it's prohibited. I mean,
We got.
and it's weird because you don't see that. Normally, I'm thinking there's gotta be a reason behind it. Because normally what you see are the typical cast of characters, no landfills, no adult entertainment, you see stuff like that. That's prohibited, that's called out as a prohibited use.
But the number of businesses we've got like that are out here and that are a part of the community, I think we gotta recognize that with definition and
Yeah.
clarify that in code.
Yeah.
Right, and then we just that's one of our recommendations to the P and Z board then. I mean, along with the definition, but, all right.
Okay.
So we change all the plot words?
Yeah, I
to-
want to say that, yeah, see, that's my pet peeve.
I'd like to look at outdoor event,
Outdoor event.
10:15.
Okay.
And it's almost consistent with, it's a different topic, but kind of consistent with what John's speaking about, the things that are compatible with our community. And I'd like to give an example. I'd like to give an example and ask for suggestions, but there are agricultural operations that have outdoor events. They're agricultural, they have people come in, and yes, they do sell tickets. And it's not an overcrowding or burdensome event that they have. But my question is, how can we promote or encourage agricultural businesses that might put on a well-respected event throughout the nation, really, because they get national attention, and even international attention, without making it an excessive hardship on them. And because this outdoor event refers to a carnival, circus, concert, festival, commercial promotion. And it's that term, commercial promotion. And then competition, sale, and other similar type of events. Now, it doesn't specify or protect someone that is obviously, and this involves bona fide ag. Okay, and this is a question I have to think about. If somebody is bona fide ag, and they do put on an outdoor event where people come and they show their products, and maybe you can address this, Howard. you know, they sell their products or they have a dinner.
What would be
How
an
could we
example?
not- pardon?
What's an example of that?
Swank Farms. They're an organic farm, and they have these
Oh.
series of dinners, and they had Emma Lagasse come out, and it was, you know, it's well known. But something like that is also agricultural, I'm concerned with it when something like that is placed under outdoor events for commercial promotion. I can see that going to the special exception area and causing a great deal of burden and.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions about that particular event. Do they have porta potties?
Do they have what?
Porta potties?
I don't know, I've never been to one, but go ahead, keep asking your questions.
Well, because in our current proposal for the special exceptions, we've created special exception categories, one of which is the outdoor events. And if you can certify that you're not doing certain things, like having porta potties, electrical connections, parking overnight, signs overnight, then you don't need a permit at all. And if you're doing any of those things which essentially can create some neighborhood impacts, then you would have to come through the special exception process. So we streamlined it to a certain extent, as long as it's obviously an event where there's going to be essentially no or very minimal impacts. You wouldn't even need to get a permit for that.
Historically and traditionally, a lot of communities have called these outdoor events temporary uses, only because technically it could involve an indoor event too. That's like really big, but the reason why you specify the outdoor event is because, as Jim is saying, it might be a church where activities are going to be occurring inside the church grounds as well, but there may be like a bazaar is a very good example. They might have in their hall, they're cooking and people are eating, they're playing games, but outside they may have other games of chance and they may have rides and all these things. And then, you got to look at if there's porta potties involved. And the big thing with the outdoor events you have to look at is, because it's a special event that's going to draw a lot of people for a short period of time, aka the temporary, that's when you want to get public safety involved, because they need to look at it to make sure it's not going to cause problems from a traffic standpoint or operational standpoint. Also, when they're running electricity, they need generators. Usually your building folks will come out and look at that, especially when you do the carnivals and things like that where they have rides for the public safety. That's usually what generates these kind of things, to have a review, whether it's a special exception or special permit or some other kind of process.
Again, and I'm just looking to the other side, and again, going kind of with John's concept of what's going on internally in the community, that somebody may want to have even a simple dressage event for the day or the weekend, or their organic farm, or just even like, what's Good Earth Farm, is it? That, has things going on there. It's, it's a small, simple, consistent flow. It's not overburdensome. I just want to make sure we're not punishing anyone by, that. And again, I understand commercial promotion, what it means, but I'm just wondering if there's at any point you differentiate somehow based on the number of people attending. I mean, is there any way to do that in the definitions?
Well, we haven't done that yet. It's really activities and services that they're going to provide on the parcel. I mean, if they're going to be doing certain things, then they have to get a permit. If they can sign an affidavit saying that we're not going to be doing any of this stuff, then we don't.
Let me describe one thing that is done, and you tell me if this fits under the special exception or you review it. The nursery industry would frequently have what they call nursery tours, and it's basically a trade association deal where when we would go through Junior Gordon's nursery, he'd invite other nursery operators just to see what he was doing, how he was doing it. He would have his conventional porta potty out there for his workers, and he would cook alligator tail and some other stuff that only Junior can cook. And people would spend a couple hours touring the nursery and talking with one another. We've had those things on our nursery. But they're really, you know, like a 4 or 5 hour event, one day, you know, no signs, but there is some parking, not that much, because, you know, you maybe have 30 or 40 people.
Let me respond this way. You kind of covered where I was going when I said sometimes a number of communities, and traditionally, customarily, they call them temporary uses, because they are temporary in nature. Now, the problem why you stay away from special exceptions or special uses is because, again, as we talked earlier, special exceptions are a form of quasi-judicial use, and they're generally meant to be more permanent uses that are going to stay with the land. That is why Jim, even though, having said that, Jim still has them as a form of special exceptions because he's taking it down to the easiest or the most simple special exception, so that it, and maybe we need to call something else, but basically what it is it's not like a normal special exception going under a quasi-judicial use, because you know, we're scaling back the amount of review, no site plan required, and you know, as we talked about, a number of things. But yeah, that's
a
really
description to you as the town manager, and you know, describing the scale of it, and the hours it's limited to. In fact, there's nothing overnight thing.
So yeah, for uses like you're describing, we're essentially using the very early phases of the special exception process as a formal way of saying that you don't need any permit.
Right.
And it's in the special exception process, but really it isn't.
So we'll review that more when we get to special exceptions.
Oh yeah, you're going to cover that big time.
Yeah, I know, but that's a good point, guys. So the things that go on in the community, you know, promoting the community atmosphere and not causing additional hardship on the landowners. Okay, what page were we next?
1016.
Yep.
And I was indicating, Madam Chair, that that's my bugaboo with the plots and the change the nomenclature. The definitions themselves are, I think, pretty much all okay.
Got a lot of plots there.
Yeah, you got a lot of plots. There's a lot of definitions that have that term in it.
So we're going to change the word plot to lot?
Lot or parcel or whatever is the more appropriate. Or plat.
Parcels consistent with the tax people and everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. And for what they call plats, you know, you've heard of boundary plats and some other kind of, it's really plat, not plot. You would say boundary plot, it's boundary plat. It's going to the old vernacular of they used to say a plot plan. When you have a survey, you get your map drawn, attached to your survey, that sort of thing. Sorry.
No, I'm laughing at a term on here. John's gonna just love you when I get to that one.
Which one is that?
No, what page are we still on? 1016, right?
Unless anybody else, yeah.
Okay, we're done with 1016? On to 1017?
1017 still continues on with those darn plots, so.
Yeah.
That's really all I have on that page.
Portable storage unit, everyone okay with that? You okay with poultry there?
Yes.
By the way, you know, the portable storage unit also includes what they lovingly refer to as pods. Some cities hate those. I don't know how the Groves feels about it, but
Hello?
you stick them, structure you put in their driveway
Well,
somewhere. And some folks get all upset about it, you know.
Now, would that also refer to large containers?
No.
You know, if it's not a
Storage
pod,
units shall not include shipping
yeah.
containers.
If it's not brought in by pod, but you know, something that you have sitting on your property that you could have removed, that could be a portable storage. Oh, well, you say that shall not include shipping containers, you're very specific there. Okay. And you have to have private property and private road in there, huh? That's why I was laughing. You really are that brave to have a definition.
Actually, you know what? I don't know if we need them. Maybe private road, because of, never mind, I'm not gonna say.
That's why I'm saying.
You're trying to code me into that, I know you.
I had to listen to the last town council meeting.
I know. Still some shrapnel.
You give John hell, I know. Okay. got his hands tied.
We
I-
could expand that definition to say,
Yeah.
a road on which no
Way to
gas
go.
tax is collected.
There you go, John, I knew it. He wasn't gonna let that go.
Yeah,
Okay.
he must be a little tired. He's a little
Yeah,
slow.
I was waiting. Okay.
What are you doing with it private?
10:18?
Yeah, I don't think Howard would, he can always tell us later.
Okay.
Property owner.
On 10:18, the first one I have is residential enterprise, only because we use that term that can be problematic in a definition of low impact. What is a, I mean, we're not really identifying what low impact is, but we're using that terminology to identify the residential enterprise. So we already talked about the fact that we're going to be looking at residential enterprise, home office, home occupation, so we'll rework that, if it's okay. And then I got plot in there again, so just keep popping up everywhere we.
Residential zoning district, Jim, and I see Agritel. For our residential zoning district, it is a AR zoning district, that's just who we are.
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, you could argue you don't need those two, residential zoning district, residential zone land, so, you know,
That's
they're
why-
superfluous, but, you know, they don't do any damage either.
Does it hurt to leave it in there?
Doesn't hurt.
Okay, so.
10:19? You ready to go or no?
Oh, you're gonna make me pass right away up? Oh, man. Okay, I will. You just won't let me have any fun here.
Go ahead.
I'm
shoot.
gonna let it
Go
go.
for it.
I'm gonna let it go.
Yeah. My first one, of course, is on 10:19 is setback, because we have my favorite word in there about 4 times. And then we have it again under shopping center out parcel.
And setbacks are pretty definite terms, you're just, I mean, pretty defined terms, you're just changing,
Plot's gonna probably should
Right,
be
that's-
lot there, or, you know, or parcel.
but this is pretty standard language.
Just a little, just some planning background on shopping center out
Yeah.
parcel. The definition is okay. A lot of times what many codes will do is they'll also identify shopping center outbuilding, because there's a difference. The out parcel is usually when they create by legal description on a shopping center, it will be its own actual parcel under some fee, simple ownership or whatever. But many shopping centers will have just outbuildings. They look like out parcels, but they're commonly ingrained in the shopping center, and it's just an outbuilding by virtue of a lease or whatever.
Are you saying, like, say, if this Publix on Southern, the ABC liquor store, would that be an outbuilding, or that's not what you're
It
referring
could
to?
be, it just depends on how it's, I'd have to look at the plan and
Okay,
look at the ownership documents and everything. Generally, if it's an outbuilding, the parcel that the outbuilding is on is common and requirements are met and it's ingrained in the entire shopping center.
right.
If it's an out parcel, usually it stands on its own and it meets its own requirements.
Oh, okay.
Although there's some commonalities, because if some out parcels have to meet the drainage requirements, that can be quite heavy, so there might be some common elements involved. It just depends on if it's fee simple or whatever, how it's set up.
Oh, site plan. Let's talk about the site plan. That's right, Mark. Site plan, a drawing illustrating a proposed development and prepared in accordance with the specifications set forth in Article 155 of these regulations. What type of drawing is a site plan? Per the town. And Jim, I've seen lots of site plans.
Well,
I can even hand draw my own site plan for the house I'm about to build somewhere.
yeah, you couldn't do that and be in.
But see, I don't know that. According to this, I'm gonna give you a hand drawing.
A site plan usually contains a whole roll of drawings. Anywhere from a drawing that shows the layout, the setbacks, where the buildings are, the parking spaces.
Right.
Lighting plan, drainage plan.
Right.
Landscape
Okay.
plans. You know.
And here's the reason I bring this up, not to be a smart aleck. the site plan is a general term you're using here, but again, site plan can vary. And literally, somebody says site plan to me in one town, and I know I can do a hand drawing, okay, and here we have site plan without the specifics, so,
Well, that's a specific section in our code.
okay. So you're saying when we see site plan here and it refers to drawing, we have the definition of what how that drawing must be provided?
Well, we can say, I guess,
No, I'm just for clarity,
a series of drawings and studies, I guess, really. 'cause,
Well, usually one thing,
No.
yeah, one thing you usually have in most definitions is the acknowledgement that it is drawn to scale.
right, that's what.
Either engineering or architectural, depending upon the
Right.
site plan. But what the plan
So
drawing-
that's what I'm trying to just, and again, this is for
Yeah.
later discussion, but I just think site plan could use a better, if this is the point, or if it's addressed somewhere else, your site plan needs to have a bit more detail or
I disagree, you're right, you're
Okay.
correct. I agree with you.
Because it's a big
Yeah.
problem
No,
for
yeah.
people.
And it should distinguish,
Sorry, John.
it should distinguish against other type plans, like a concept plan, and yeah, you're right, absolutely.
Well, one thing that, it ties into what's on page 6 of your recommendations, where you can administratively make a determination to grant an application waiver, and you can make the site plan more of a concept drawing or something else.
Right.
And this goes back to Alan Harris, if he was putting in his commercial equestrian facility, he shouldn't have to necessarily put in a survey and a detailed site plan, but if he's got 5 acres and he wants to put a commercial equestrian facility, Mark's recommendation is that he's got the flexibility to make an administrative determination that if it's outlined on a 5-acre parcel.
Right, and that is basically a separate area of how to deal with it. What I'm just referring to is,
What's the matter?
We're sorry, I just turned the hi-hats off.
Don't worry.
You can say we're just turning the lights on.
They want to make sure we're going to lock up, which I will,
Yes.
for the last one.
have you left it?
I do have the key and the code.
No, but I'm just referring to some small details that, whether they give an exception or not is a separate issue. I'm just referring to details of when you submit if you're asked for a site plan, just needs to be either give a little bit more direction or just let us know that's addressed somewhere else and referred to.
You want to just add the words unless administratively determined otherwise by the town manager? Unless administratively determined otherwise by the town manager?
What?
I'd rather leave it.
Okay.
Okay, you want to leave this, you don't
Do
think?
you want to put any specificity to it as far as, she does have a
Because
point, it's a
it's,
little.
Yeah.
and we'll talk about this, now's not the time to talk about it, and I'll give you.
How about just
specifics.
needs to rework it, and we'll move on?
Yeah, there's just,
Yeah, because a site plan approval is more than a drawing. That's what you're getting at. A site plan can either be one page with essentially a little map on it, or it can be all of these documentation that's required by our code.
You'd have to add more detail to it, like, starting out with a plan or set of plans that, you keep building on that, drawing scale.
I think that's-
just needs, he understands where I'm coming from. I'm just not good at verbalizing it tonight. I've had this discussion, I think, before with Mark briefly, but, okay. Storage of vehicles. The 1020?
On 1019.
Oh, he's back.
Weren't we talking originally about the problem with the definition of setback, it being so convoluted and unreadable that you really can't move? I believe it was you that had a problem with it, no? Am I misremembering?
No, I'm pretty comfortable with it. It's fairly self-explanatory. Setback is a fairly simple test. It's really just a question of where you start measuring from and where we measure to. And as long as that's clear, you're in good shape.
1020?
I have nothing on it.
Oh, we, nothing in 1020?
Howard, I just want you to know that swine is very well defined.
Mhm.
So, I hope we come back to that one.
The trailer? We've got, so in 1020, we've got a note there about the trailer that we've already addressed.
Well, yeah, I guess if the other definitions lead to, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Well, yeah, and I've read forward, and you get to vehicle recreational, and it starts going into all kinds of trailers now, so.
Oh, yeah.
I think we could take all those definitions of trailers and make one.
Put them all together.
that's a good point. Maybe that might be something to think about when you're reworking it. John, anything on surface water management system? Any comments? You happy with that?
That's the responsibility of the landowner.
Okay, so, but this, no, seriously though, this is okay, this definition is okay? You see any?
You know, I think the concept gets confused between landowner management of water and canal transport of water to the location. I mean, the term includes dams, impoundment reservoirs, and appurtenant works defined in the statute. We don't have any of those. But, you know, as a general definition, you know, red bottom.
Okay, Mark, you okay with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. 1021?
I don't have anything other than the vehicle issue that we raised.
Vehicle commercial or semi-trailer, truck, tractor, bus, business vehicle,
Right.
which one?
I think the discussion was to see if we could take all of the related definitions and just put it together in one group under one general heading with some subheadings.
I think the commercial and the recreational probably be separate, because just kind of by definition, a commercial truck, or truck tractor, for example, I mean, it's a big thing, it pulls a big trailer, stuff like that. And when you go to the recreational, everything's definitely, and I know there's a definition, I'm sure it's somewhere about when you get to a specific weight over 26,001 pounds, you're not considered commercial.
Okay, so then that goes through to 1022. Now, the water management area, that's more or less for developments and private property owners. So, because it says a portion of a development, so is it just strictly for developments, commercial areas?
Where again, sir?
Oh, sorry,
Water.
page 1022.
Water management area.
Yeah, on the bottom, water management area, this looks like where it says a portion of a development that is a functional part. Is that, when I see the word development, does that mean for developments, or does it?
I think it's meant to be general as it relates to, because it does say as part of the surface water management system.
Right, so I'm
obviously,
wondering if it means,
you know, if you have like a shopping center and they have to provide a.
so then this is related
Stormwater
to
drainage.
Yeah,
commercial.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm just, this has nothing to do with private property.
I don't think so. No.
Just because, you know, in our area, there's so much water in our area and we all deal with it, that's what I'm just trying to
Well,
understand.
no, it's more like the Florida DOT is looking for sites for stormwater drainage from the expanded
Ponds.
southern.
Like what's
boulevard.
going on, okay, so like picture six. Ten 23.
Wildlife pets.
There you go.
Can we get some clarification as to why that's in there? Why is a raccoon not a wildlife pet?
Oh, yes they are, not allowed to feed
Well,
the raccoons. Against the law.
According to this, they have to be only animals that are designated as endangered, threatened, or special concern. And raccoons are neither, or any of those three.
I have a feeling this was put in because of some of the folks we have in town, like the cats, people like that. I
Well,
think.
why are you
But
even
that would
bringing up
be
raccoons?
dangerous.
Why are you bringing up raccoons? I don't know.
Because it says here, because as far as I'm
No, it says
concerned,
a reptile though, Howard, read the, it's the dangerous part.
Amphibian.
Yeah,
dangerous or poisonous animal, oh, okay, the reptile,
Yeah.
okay.
It says special concern to the state of Florida, you know, through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. That kind of identifies it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
but there's gotta be something in the ULDC that mentions wildlife pets for this to have a reason to be in
Jim, where does
here.
it say that,
That's what I
about
wanted to know.
wildlife pets?
In the ULDC?
Good question.
I don't have a clue.
Maybe for rescues and stuff.
Well, and
I
again,
can't
Lots
think
of
of
rescue
anything.
wildlife.
I tried to check some of these things, I couldn't find out, doesn't mean it's not there, but.
Well, I'm
it's
sure they were thinking of Steve Sepik.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, we had that national event where Bobo got out.
And then there was the other guy,
Then you-
your friend, what's his name? Your friend, the guy on,
well, because the
Road?
helicopter scared the
where
tiger.
where the.
Yeah, the news helicopter
cat was
came down and
frozen?
scared the tiger.
Oh, Russell's friend,
Yeah,
Russell's
that's
friend,
Russ.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Russ was telling me about
What's that guy's name? I can't think. Himmler?
He had like a wildcat. frozen.
Wildcat was frozen, remember?
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
the guy
Gene
over
Steve
here.
Stimler.
Stimler.
Yeah, he's on
D-Row.
D-Row,
Oh.
yeah, so.
Okay, Howard, are you okay with wildlife?
Well, no, I'm not, because
Okay, here we go.
we're eliminating definitions because they're not applicable to the ULDC. Now, if somebody threw that in there because they had in mind to regulate Tarzan, well then, fine, but let's see why it's in there.
Well, if we've got ag res, and we gotta have some way to have Gene Stimler and Tarzan encompassed.
It may have been because of the nature of Waxahachie Grove, where these used to come to locate, maybe they were trying to also be proactive and prospective in terms of.
Fine,
anybody
but
else.
what is this definition in relation to, other than just a standalone definition that has nothing to do with anything in our codes? That's my question. And we are.
That I agree with,
And we
yes.
are eliminating things that have nothing to do with anything.
Yes.
Well,
How about
here's-
Jim looks to see if it ever even exists anywhere, and then if it doesn't.
Here's
Yeah.
my,
Well, yeah, we'll be doing that routinely, so.
I certainly can't find anything.
well, my question is, wouldn't this apply the definition of wildlife, well, wildlife pets, I was just gonna say wildlife rescue, but
Well, again, the only reason I can think of why it's in there is because of those existing uses that we just talked about, and the fact that if there ever was any kind of legal action from a land use standpoint,
Mhm.
we would have it defined.
okay.
But we have no reference to it. And again,
I agree.
my initial comment in relation to raccoons is for that reason. Nobody disputes that somebody that has a raccoon as a pet has a wildlife pet. However, this definition seeks to write raccoons out of the definition of a wildlife pet. And so I just don't understand the whole reasoning behind this, especially if there's nothing in the ULDC that needs this as a reference.
Okay.
Well, Madam, fine.
Well, let me,
Well, we have something here called exhibition of class 1 and class 2 wildlife, which I'm not sure what that means, but there's a whole section and we talk about the wild animals in there, so I mean, it's possible that this section could relate to that, but we'd have to look at it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I was just gonna say, Madam Chair, I think for all of these, we're gonna be trying to look to see, like, to make sure that they're, especially as we're reworking them, is there a reason why, that they show up somewhere else in the ULDC that really necessitates their being in the code.
all right, any other Everybody okay with the yard definitions?
Lots of, right?
Okay, 1020,
Madam Chair, I have a bunch of uses, a bunch of terms that weren't defined, I believe, and are in the code.
Jim's
Well,
just
we gotta
been waiting
double
for this one.
Well, let me just run them by you, just to see what you think. We don't have best management practices. We don't have boundary anywhere, which I think is a crucial term that we probably needed. We don't define block, we don't define berm, potentially aquifer, although I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and check some of them. We don't define gross or net acreage. We don't
Those aren't all standard accepted in just,
Well, they usually pop up, I'm pretty sure we'll find that, a reference to that somewhere. We do adjoin to some extent, but we don't have adjacent, so that's another possibility. We don't have a certificate of occupancy, which would follow with some development. We don't have density net or gross.
these are all standard basic terms that
That should be in, yeah, should be defined, and we don't, and we identified the other one tonight, that landscape, landscape,
John pointed out.
Modern landscaping.
Yeah.
So you can't get, so if we don't have a definition of certificate of occupancy, then therefore you cannot recognize a certificate of occupancy?
No, but, you know, you can't assume everybody knows what certificate of occupancy is.
All right, let's put those on the list.
Yep.
All right, so we are,
To look at, or, you know.
absolutely, we are finished with B1. And we are now going on to, do we need to make any motions here? We've just gone through the definitions, we don't need to make any commentary. Moving on to B2, review of ULDC articles, Article 75, non-conforming uses, structures, and plots. Should I address the second one also, or you want to?
Well, I guess the question is, it is now 8:35. I mean, if we get into these, you're
Well,
talking, you know, a while.
let's, how about we do this, and, because this has been going on for some time. How about Article 75, non-conforming uses, structures and plots, Article 170, special exception uses. Between you and Jim, we will make no comments. Let's take the next half hour to have these two just go through it, and then
And if Howard does make a comment,
Howard's not going to make a comment. From 8:30 to 9, Jim and Mark have the floor, and I will zip it. Everyone, if we could just give them the floor, and then at 9 o'clock, we will take a consensus of what everyone would like to do. If you would like to table the questions to the next meeting and continue. But I think we should, we are proceeding on to 75-1.
Okay.
Okay.
What I'll do is, so that Jim and I can both get in, I'll give you a very brief overview of 75, and then we'll come back and we'll hit it in more detail next meeting as well. It starts off, it's not a long section, but it's a very important section, non-conforming uses, structures, and plots, as you know. You have the purpose and intent, and 75.010 is a section that talks about the uses and structures existing as of October 1, 2006, and we will certainly be looking at that in more detail. 75.015 talks about the determination of a nonconformity. Basically, you know, there's a talk about an administrative appeal. We do have to, in dealing with the town attorney, one of the things that there were some problems with the language in the administrative appeal, and so we're going to have to address that, but I won't get into that tonight. That's a separate item, but it does kind of relate to that. We then go ahead and we do the non-conforming uses. As you know, with non-conformities, there's use, there's structure, there's lot, and which our code does address. But then there is also another category that some codes have that some call it a characteristic, a non-conformity, a non-conforming characteristic of use. And generally what that is like if you have a parking area, let's say in conjunction with a commercial use that doesn't have enough parking spaces. Technically, it makes it non-conforming. And some codes go back and they say the use is non-conforming. It's really a characteristic of the property. It's not necessarily the use itself. So some codes try to identify that and narrow it down and how it would impact, would it impact somebody not being able to expand or do those kinds of things. So you look at that just to cover all areas. We talk about the extension of a non-conforming use of structure, the extension of non-conforming use of land, the basic repair, alteration, enlargement of structures for non-conforming uses. That's generally in every non-conforming code, and we can talk about that a little more. Discontinuation of the non-conforming use of land. That generally talks about, a lot of codes call that the abandonment, for a certain period of time. What happens? Same thing with the structure. Reconstruction, generally, that talks about the fact that that's a lot of codes used to call that the act of God situation, where if you had a structure that was destroyed by either some kind of storm event or fire, and if it was a non-conforming use and it was destroyed in more than 50%, so that's hence the number 51%, you had to go ahead and rebuild the whole thing. You'd have to wipe out the non-conformity. Uses that are non-conforming due to density, that's another situation. That usually occurs when you've had a code change and you require a stricter density, and then you have properties. I guess the good example would be all our parcels in the town that aren't 5 acres. We have a lot of them, so that kind of plays into that. Non-conforming structures, then you get into the fact that again, reconstruction due to damage. Sometimes a structure can be non-conforming because it doesn't meet a setback. So there's all these degrees of non-conformity that you have to look at, and of course you have to weigh them against land use and law principles as it relates to the zoning of them. Non-conformities of all types are valuable property rights. So normally that's why they're given such credence in the code, because as long as you protect them, you don't abuse them, you don't increase it when you're not supposed to, those kinds of things, then they're fine. Again, my favorite term, non-conforming plots of record, but what that is, generally you have the situation, in most cases when you have a non-conforming lot, let's say you're supposed to have 5 acres and you, for some reason, have a lot that's 4.23 acres for whatever reason. Generally, the remedy to that, if there is not a provision talking about platting in lots, is you need to get a variance to the lot size. If there's a good reason for it, that's one of those cases where normally a variance should be granted. But generally, what you'll find in most codes, depending upon whether it was in the county or in the city, they usually go by some baseline starting point where they'll be considered lots of record. Let me see what else. And then we have Section 7535, which is another non-conforming use provision, uses as of October 1, 2006. So with that, I'll really get into more detail next week, and we'll go provision by provision and either identify if we see any problems with it or anything. That was just the general overview of it. And I've given Jim 20 minutes, Jim, to get the special exceptions. You got the bulk of it. Go ahead.
All right.
So page 54 of 71.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, Virginia, you asked me a couple of meetings ago if I could come up with a definition or list of uses that qualify under the definition of nonprofit community recreational facility, and I sort of fumbled around and gave you some ridiculous use, I think. And I've done a little research since then, and I think what we might be talking about for those kinds of facilities are things like YMCA, YWCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, maybe museums, cultural exhibits. I know the Salvation Army even has a lot of like Boys and Girls Club type things, and I think that that's more what it means than the one use that I scrambled to give you last time. So, okay, yeah, starting on page.
One more question.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable that we think of Vince Ramos as falling under that category?
From what little I know of the use, I would say yes, but I probably need to understand a little bit better exactly what the use is. But I would say off the top of my head, I would say yes.
Yeah, I think just the equestrian aspect makes it a little grayer, but I'm in agreement with you.
All right, so 5471.
Yeah. The table on 54 is all of the uses by zoning district that currently require a special exception use. The left-hand column is the zoning district. The middle column is the specific use that requires a special exception, and the far right-hand column is whether or not that is a principal use or an accessory use, and also whether it also has to meet the conditions of section 80, which is a conditional use. So it's possible that for example, outdoor events currently would have to get a special exception and also meet the requirements of section 80 for a conditional use. Now,
Page 55? Are you on page 55?
or
Or are you just staying on page 54?
yeah, we just kind of run through it. I'm not really going through it
Okay.
page by page. I'm
Good.
trying to give you the highlights. What I've done is essentially, if you want to go to page 58, what I've essentially done is taken all of the uses that require special exception approval at this point and created three special exception categories. Category A requires a full special exception review. Category B requires an abbreviated special exception review. And category C, I have temporary events, but that really should be outdoor events to make it match up with the code. And the categories that I came up with were essentially based on my understanding or my field for the potential impacts that these could have on neighborhoods. Those requiring a full special exception review are those that very likely would generate the greatest impacts on the neighborhoods. And going down to category C, the outdoor events under certain circumstances have very minimal impacts and wouldn't require an approval at all. So,
To any extent, as we discussed in the past, we're recommending that even in category A, does not require a full-blown site plan like we were talking earlier, but more of a concept.
it all depends on the specific use and the location. Let me get into this just a little bit. I think once I get into the process itself, that'll clear that up a little bit. What I've, in addition to creating the categories, I've set up a application and review process that simplifies that process to a fairly great extent over and above what an applicant would have to go through right now. And looking at the top of page 59, those 6 bullet points essentially comprise the proposed review process. The first step would be for anyone that is proposing any of these special exception uses would fill out what I call a zoning confirmation request, and an example of that's on page 66. And it's a simple one-pager which essentially gives some basic information on the property and identifies specifically what they want to do on the property. They would fill that out and then file that zoning confirmation request with the staff. the staff would look at it, and if it's an application for an outdoor event, then the applicant could sign an affidavit based on this zoning confirmation request form, that if they had no overnight signage on the site, no overnight buildings, tents, or similar structures, no electrical, plumbing, or similar utility connections, no proposed sanitary facilities, they must be available on the site, no overnight parking, and that they would pick up the trash on a daily basis. If they could certify all of those conditions, they wouldn't need a permit at all. All they would have to do is come in, fill out the zoning confirmation request form, sit down with the staff, sign the affidavit, and then that's all they'd have to do. They would be done with the process.
Jim, real quick, wouldn't it be helpful if instead of attached property survey, you said, you know, copies of the PAPA maps?
Yeah, in certain circumstances, that'd be good. If they wouldn't have to go through the process, just something to identify where the property is, who the owner is.
I mean, those PAPA maps are pretty nice.
Yeah, yes, they are. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Okay. So everybody fills out a zoning confirmation request. Gives it to the staff. If they're an outdoor event and they can certify those that they're not going to be doing any of those items that I just discussed, then they don't have to get a permit at all. But the council would be notified at their next meeting that they came in and made the application, and this is what the staff's determination was. So that the council would be aware of all of the administrative decisions that the staff is making. Now, based on the staff response to the zoning confirmation request for other than outdoor events, they would call a meeting and sit down with the applicant and go through the special exception and site plan criteria. And based upon the event itself and the expected impacts, staff has the ability to waive any of the site plan requirements that staff feels are not necessary for this particular use. If it's a use that's not going to have, obviously not going to have certain impacts, and there's a site plan application requirement that you need to assess those impacts, staff can say it's not necessary because we feel that you're not going to be having substantial impacts. And a special exception B, which is sort of the middle ground application, the town manager, the town staff would have the ability to administratively approve a special exception B application. It would not have to go through all of the advertising, public hearings, meetings of the planning and zoning board and council approval. Staff has the ability to administratively approve special exception B applications, but again, staff would make the council aware of its administrative approval by putting a list of these approvals on the council agenda. And the final step, as I already mentioned a couple times, that the staff would include completed zoning confirmation request forms, staff responses, and a summary of application waivers as information items on the town council agendas, so that the council again would be aware of all of the activities that the staff has gone through. The special exception A applications have to go through the entire process. So that leads me to the final component, is the actual code revisions to implement the changes that I'm suggesting. On pages 60 through 62 are changes to the town's advertising requirements for special exceptions, and it's essentially on page 60 where I have identified separate review requirements for special exception A, B, and C. Some of them require the full public notice and advertising requirements, and some of them just require notification of its neighbors and posting at the town hall, as well as letting the town council know that they have been administratively approved.
Quick question.
Yeah.
On page 60, down at the bottom, why do you have the different requirements for the readings by the town council? Why wouldn't those be the same?
Where's this now? John?
Well, it says town council first reading. These are rezonings initiated by the property owner.
Okay.
You have town council first reading, town council second reading. Why would the advertising and notification requirements be different?
Okay, now that's in the code now. The only thing that I'm changing are the special exception A, B, and C. The rezoning requirements are as they are now. I'm not suggesting any changes to that. I can't necessarily tell you why that's the way it is in the code, but that is the way it's in the code now.
For the readings, I mean, it would seem logical to me that, you know, if you were going to have a reading on a rezoning, and on one reading you were going to require an ad, and another one you're not requiring an ad, and one you're not requiring notice, and the other you're requiring notice, how would those be the same?
Well, because the requirements for how you process ordinances is based on state statutes.
Okay.
And this is how the state says that the town could advertise on first reading if it wanted to. This process that we have here meets the minimum requirements of the state statute.
So it kind of says the town council could act on a request on the first reading, but then the second reading is where somebody at the last minute, if they wanted to, they could raise objection or question.
Well,
based on an ad or a notice.
Yeah, I mean, the public is more informed, obviously, if there's a legal notice on both readings.
Right.
But the council has the right to speak on both readings, and the only reading that has to be notified by state law, noticed by state law, is the second reading.
Unless it's changing the schedule of district regulations, then it has its own process.
Yeah, that's right. This is rezoning initiated by property owner, right?
Yeah.
So the only changes that I'm suggesting are right in the middle of that page, where we have the public notice requirements for special exception A, B, and C. Will actually be in C. Special exception A has the current requirements for all special exceptions, and I'm suggesting that for special exception B and C, we make them less restrictive. And the balance of the pages 63 through 65 has the actual text revisions to implement the revised special exception process as I've outlined it. And pages 67 through 70 has the special exception procedure as it's currently written. So the changes on pages 63 through 65 would essentially be inserted into the pages that start on 67. Now this is the way that I want to find out if this is a confusing way that I've done this, or if you would rather have it done where we have the current text with the proposed text inserted in it. So that you have both the current text and the proposed changes all in one document, as opposed to having the changes essentially in one document in a few pages and the text as it exists now in a separate document.
Okay, so 67 to 71 is the existing document.
Is the existing special exception.
Page 67 to 61 is the existing special exception.
And then 63 through 65 are the proposed changes.
You know, the way the state does it on the statute bill development is they cross through but leave it readable, and they underline the changes.
Yeah.
That works pretty well.
Yeah, well, that's essentially what I've done on page 63, although really everything that is on those pages is underlined, which indicates the new addition. Yeah, that's right. I don't have any, I don't think I have.
Strike-throughs?
Yeah, I do have a couple strike-throughs on page 11.
On what page?
Page 64, I'm sorry.
You have what?
A couple of strike-throughs,
Yes.
which are deletions on page 64.
Okay, so the deletion, we're to ignore those?
No, well, where it's struck through, that's a change to the
The
existing
existing.
text. That's a
Okay.
deletion of the existing text.
All right,
Where I have it underlined, that's an addition to the existing text.
underline is addition.
So in effect, you've already done what I just asked.
Yes, except that I don't have full documents combined. That's the thing that I don't have. And in the final version of this, probably when it goes to the council for adoption, that's the way we'll be set up, the entire section with the underlying strike through. So it makes it a little bit easier to see how the existing and the proposed changes affect the existing text. So on page 63, I started out by just identifying the three categories, A, B, and C. And then section 170.015, I have the application requirements for for all three of the categories. And page 64, I have some of the review standards and some of the other administrative, I guess, procedures related to the approval of the special exceptions. And I'm sorry, that's a really quick run through.
Yeah, I think it was good to get that run through from you guys. Now, it is 9 o'clock. Mr. Harris just has another comment, which I will, because he is from the P&Z, which is why I believe it's important what he has to say, and also because of his building background, that's what.
And before we go to Mr. Harris, Madam Chair, I just want to say the reason why Jim is asking for your input relative to how the structure looks is because the special exceptions have been a problem for a long time in the current code. That is probably one of the amendments that, and I know I'll be recommending to town council they move ahead of all the other work that this group is doing, because that needs to get fixed pretty quickly. So, whatever makes it easier for you, just let us know, and then we'll try to address that.
Oh, no, I've got one more comment.
Oh, okay.
I was also thinking, we're talking about these historical legacy uses, and that Howard had given a outline of a procedure that he felt would be a good way to address these uses, part of which was to grant it, to require a special exception, a simple special exception. And my thought is that we could make these historical legacy uses, or whatever term we come up with, a category B special exception, which is an administrative approval by the staff. And the requirements for the application could be determined by staff at the initial meeting with the applicant. To see what kind of detail they would have to provide in the application. So I think that the historical legacy process fits in pretty well with the way that we have the special exception process set up right here.
Jim, I only have one comment on the top of page 64. Where you've got the underlined wording for B. In that last line, after notification, I was going to suggest you put in, and no objection by any member of the town council. I kind of feel that it's their responsibility with regard to special exceptions, and I know they're going to rely heavily on your recommendations, but I didn't think you should just take away the ability of a town council member to object if he had any concern with the special conditions or anything else that you administrated.
I totally agree, and that's why I felt that they should be all placed on the consent agenda where they can be pulled.
Okay.
But I can put that language in there for sure.
Just as an acknowledgement, I'd insert that in, no objection by any member of the town council.
And there is one thing, I mean, Jim and I have talked about this, and I've told Jim on many occasions, I'm not one of these town managers that likes to take too much discretion and flexibility on, because I certainly don't want to infringe upon town council and their decision-making authority. We're going to be meeting with the town attorney, because I think ultimately the one thing we want to make sure is he's in agreement, because of the fact that special exceptions are a quasi-judicial use. Obviously, if that's not going to fly, then we can't have the town manager making determinations when it really needs to go through the quasi-judicial process, which is pretty much outlined, and it's because of the evidentiary aspects to it. So it may be a simple change as not totally calling them special exceptions, but calling them something else, or
Special permit or something.
maybe they become conditional, all conditional uses, which is different sets of conditions. I mean, I just wanted to let you know that, because from a legal standpoint, we may have to come back with the same program, but a whole different program, if you will, in terms of nomenclature and approach.
Would it reduce the cost of the process
What if it's,
to the person applying for the special exception? Because this is a very costly process.
Well,
They're talking about simplifying it.
yeah, that's right.
Right, that's why I haven't heard how it, and that's my one comment here, and we are at 5 minutes past 9, so what, if everybody could take a minute or two to give Jim some feedback, and I'll give you some feedback as to my concern about identifying, somehow, we can't get an exact amount, but I'll make a comment. So if everyone, what I'd like to do is just give you guys some feedback from each person. And then if we can table further discussion, reserve the ability to table, or however I need to say it. We can
continue on old business.
Yes, I'd like to continue under old business so everyone can review this one last time. At the next meeting, we'll start with the old business and finishing our comments on this. I do like the way you presented it to us in the separate. For me, it was much easier to understand, and I do have some comments I'll make at the next meeting, but if we want to start with Howard and go our way down, and then I'll finish. Howard?
I had a lot of comments, but the main thing I wanted to talk about was, and I believe it was in this section.
And we'll be continuing to the next meeting also.
Some of these special exceptions, we talked about issuing permits for multiple years. Specifically, the outdoor events that the church has every year. I don't know which one I put the notes in, but that needs to be put in there somewhere. Like the church over at E Road in Okeechobee, that every single year they go in for this permit, and it's the same thing every year, and it needs to be simplified so it's conditionally issued for 5 years, and all they have to do every year is come to the office and say, hey, we're doing the same thing again. So it's not a burden continually, and that's the one major thing I think needs to be in there.
Katie?
I just picked 5 years off the wall number.
I can say most of it for the next meeting. My biggest issue is the commercial commercial equestrian operation being in here.
Oh, me too, but that's,
Yeah.
And we'll
I
see,
know we're
there's,
going to that.
I have a feeling we're gonna have quite a bit to say to
Yeah.
start the next meeting. That,
Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
The only thing I saw that I thought was a good simplification was on page 59, where the town manager can administratively waive certain requirements of the special exception process or modify them to suit the circumstances. But I like the idea of a special exception because it raises the question, and it does require the involvement of the town management and the town staff. And if it's categorized in a way that it can be handled in a simplified way compared to the existing process, I think that's what we ought to discuss at the next meeting.
okay, I also have some concerns on the table, and I've spoken to you briefly, that I thought we should have a section D that actually relieves quite a bit of burden on some of the agricultural areas, and I'd like to reserve that discussion. As I said, we'll continue it. We'll start with old business at the next town council meeting, and I'd like to call to ask for adjournment, or if anyone would like to continue, please let me know.
Virginia, can I just have one quick question?
Oh, go ahead.
You're talking about creating a category D.
I had, oh, I'm sorry, yes. We had talked briefly, and I think we may, and some of us here may have an opinion where we're reviewing the categories and we feel that some of these may still be a little bit too intense, and ask for another category D. Whatever we can, that's what we're saying, maybe we'll come up with some suggestions on the process, because you've outlined the process, how you're doing, so we're just going to give you our feedback, whether P&Z cares for it, or the town, they may not care for it. It's just, our feedback, things from the community we've heard. And I don't know, does anyone have a reason to continue? If we can we can table this discussion to the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll just continue on this.
Okay. My only one question was, I was wondering if, for the next meeting, if 5:30 was okay, or if everyone wants to stay with 5 o'clock?
Whatever works for you is good for me.
Pardon?
Whatever's good for you is good for me.
It's 5, I would like to go for 5:30.
I'm like the government, I'm here to help.
Okay, let's go 5:30. And May 16th, I know we had 5 o'clock, but let's go 5:30, May 16th.
One more quick, is it okay if the individual members have like a bunch of questions for them to call me?
Or
ahead of
email,
time?
just
So-
email
me, or email
Okay.
me, or you might
Email Mark, and then maybe we can have the answers all set, ready to go next meeting?
That would be a great idea. This way it gives,
Yeah, that way,
Okay.
I can think about answers that I can tell.
right, and that allows us more time to word our, when you have to put it in writing, it makes it some thought into what you're, the details of what we have to say. Okay, Keith?
Yes. For the record, I'm here as a private citizen. My name is Keith Harris. I reside at 2580 C Road. I would like to comment on the special exception use permit. I recognize it as a valuable tool to ensure compatibility among the property owners of the town of Loxahatchee Road. I find great exception with the commercial equine operations being listed in that area. I can wait till the next meeting to talk, or if I can have a few moments of your time, I would like to address that issue.
Yes, anybody object to him speaking?
I think it'd be more valuable at the next meeting.
I agree.
Okay, well, let me do this. How about you give us and I'm gonna take this part, if you could give just 5 minutes, it's 9:10. Just give us 5 minutes, and then, to synopsis? It won't take you more than 5 minutes. Usually you're pretty good.
No, this is lengthy.
He
I have a
goes,
lot to say.
Okay,
Next meeting.
next meeting,
Okay.
because that's what we're going to be talking about the whole issue,
Right.
so. I need to get an agenda packet from you for this. Could you please, I'll pick it up at the office.
For this meeting? You
Yeah, the
sent-
one that everybody had.
You were sent an agenda packet.
Yeah, I didn't know we had a meeting.
Oh, the next meeting is May 16th.
Yeah, but I mean, I can pick it up from the town office from you.
Oh, you're saying you would rather receive a hard copy than an email? Is that
You
what you're
mean for the
saying?
next meeting you want?
No, this
Oh.
packet for tonight's meeting that everybody's been perusing, I never got it,
Sure.
because I never got, the email somehow got lost in cyberspace. So.
Sure. I send them all via email, but I'd be happy to give you one.
In fact, when I called the office, the secretary said, no, the meeting's not till next week. I said, well, how come everybody's got an agenda packet and everybody's talking about it?
No.
She goes, no, it's not till next week.
It's
Well, let
also
me
on
check.
the internet.
And she, well, you know,
okay,
We're just trying to keep you on your toes.
I do want to make one point now, though. I do want to make one point in regard to, at the beginning of the meeting, we asked Mr. Harris to stay to when we started the discussion of special exceptions. Okay, and I realize we're continuing the discussion of special exceptions, but we did ask him to wait.
Madam Chair, on that point, I mean, our procedure is kind of set up for something you're going to talk about and dispose of in one night, and this one's kind of been a
Okay,
contained.
so
I would
just-
think next meeting, it might be courteous to Mr. Harris, maybe if we let him speak before we get into
Right.
any discussion. And then, we can do deliberation, he can still, again, speak afterward, like we talked
All
about.
right, I just wanted to remind that we did ask him, though, at the beginning to stay. That was just my point.
it's not a matter of convenience, it's a matter of
No,
him having the greatest impact, what he feels passionate
Okay,
about.
but I just wanted to remind you that we did ask him to sit through this. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second. Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned
You can tell
at
us,
9:13:14.
tell us now, a month later, we won't remember what you said, or come back in a month and tell us when we're ready to talk about it.
Buenas noches.
All right, so